Okay, Merrick, it's your live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Perth Youth Council this 4th day of October. I'd like to call our meeting to order, and if everyone could please bow their head for a moment of reflection. Thank you. First on our agenda is the confirmation of the agenda. One thing before I have a motion, we're going to move item 8.2.1 up behind the delegations. That will be the first order of business after our delegation. So I need a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as amended for October 4, 2022 meeting of council, the Township of Perth be approved as amended. Moved by Andrew, second by Jeremy. All those in favor? Carried. There's a lot of you on the screen tonight. Hopefully I can find all of you. If you have pecuniary interest, you can disclose it now or as the meeting goes along. We have 13 items on our consent agenda. Is there anything anyone has a question with, or they would like to be dealt with it separately? Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor Riggett. I'm just at 5.1.13. I'm just wondering if there's a little more information on any changes that'll be coming with public consultation and land use planning. If anybody's heard anything from the county or staff knows any more, how it'll affect us, if at all. Is it more public consultation or less? It's kind of the question I have. Thank you.
Okay, Mike?
Through you, Mayor Riggett. Yeah, at this point, the announcement that came from the minister's office was kind of fresh information, Councillor McAlpine. So I don't believe the county has had any real opportunity to give consideration to whether or not it will change the public process. I do anticipate there will probably be some conversation about it, but my suggestion is that it probably will not change for us, but it is early, so that I might be wrong about that, but that's my initial assessment.
Okay, anyone else? If not, I would like to though draw your attention to 5.1.3, and that is about Fire Prevention Week. And next week is Fire Prevention Week, and on Wednesday, October the 12th, from 6 to 8, we're going to have open houses in our Milverton and Stephenville stations. And on Thursday, October the 13th, from 6 to 8, we're going to have an open house in our Shakespeare station. So I'm hoping that everyone can attend, see what the firemen do, and please tell all your neighbors and your friends to drop by. So if there's nothing else, we need a motion that items 5.1.1 to 5.113 is set out on the consent agenda for the October 4, 2022 regular meeting of council be received for information, and that the minutes of September 20, 2022 regular council meeting be adopted. A mover and a seconder, moved by Jerry. Second by Amanda. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, now we're going to move to our delegations, and the first delegation we have tonight is Mr. Steve Burns, and he's an engineer, environmental planner with BM Ross and Associates, and we're going to talk about the Shakespeare water system. So, Mr. Burns, welcome to council, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council and staff. Is possible to get the slide presentation up? Okay, good. So next slide, please. So really, I'm here tonight to do two things. I want to update council on where we are with respect to the environmental assessment we are doing with for the Shakespeare water system, talk about what we've done to date, what we found, talk a bit about the input that we've received, particularly from the public, and secondly, to present for council approval preferred solution. Next slide, please. So the purpose, the intent of this environmental assessment was really to determine whether it is feasible and desirable to provide, in addition to treatment for the water system, to provide storage. And the thinking is that if we could provide storage, we would not only meet the goal of providing better water quality through treatment, but we create the opportunity to provide fire protection or improve fire protection in the community. And I think most importantly, by adding storage, we ensure that the money that is spent on improvements now also considers the long-term interests of the whole community, not just the water system. So there's a number of reasons for doing this, and they really relate to creating doing works that would create an opportunity. So next slide, please. So we're following along in a prescribed process called a municipal class EA process. And this process has really 5 steps or 5 phases. But how many of these phases you actually proceed through depends on the complexity of your project. In our case, the only reason we're doing an EA, that we have to do one, is because we are investigating building components of the water works on sites that at this point in time don't have waterworks. So in order to build new facilities and a new site, you have to go through this process. But you don't, in terms of the EA process, you don't have to do all 5 steps. You only really need to do 1 and 2. So in step 1, we generally establish what the problem is we're trying to solve, or the opportunity that we're trying to take advantage of. And this particular process is more about opportunity than solving a problem. In phase 2, once we've decided what the opportunity is we want to look at, we establish what the alternative solutions are to sort of enhancing to putting in place that opportunity. When we talk about alternative solutions, they're more big picture things, and they can be detailed or not detailed, but in general, they're what you would consider the forest rather than the trees. If we were dealing with more complex facilities, we would have to do phase 3. Phase 3 is more about the trees than it is about the forest. So it gets into detail. Now, this will become more clear as I go through the presentation, but we have, even though we are kind of officially in stage 2, we have done quite a bit of work that would normally be considered phase 3 work, because it's really necessary we believe, for council to understand and make decisions. So next slide, please. So in every environmental assessment, a great deal of effort is put into consultation. And the very first piece of consultation is a public notice is published. It's sent out to government ministries, review agencies, anybody who we believe would be a direct stakeholder. The notice was sent to all the property owners in Shakespeare, and a letter describing what we were looking at and providing the notice was sent to Indigenous communities. That is part of the provincial requirements. And as a result of that initial notice, we got 32 submissions from residents. We got some feedback from agencies and ministries and so on. I'll talk about that briefly later. But the key thing is we got 32 submissions from residents. And as a result of those submissions and questions that were asked and things that were said, we felt we needed to clarify some things. So we went back in April with a little update letter report and provided more detail. And as a result of that, we received an additional 15 comments. Some of those comments were from persons from the first 32. So next slide, please. So this very briefly summarizes what we feel we heard from the residents. In general, people believe that water quality on the municipal system is not good. And we know that already. That's part of the original initiative for this project. It has elevated concentrations of arsenic, but it also has elevated concentrations of iron, which causes staining, can result in odor problems, a number of things. The majority of the comments that we received indicated that there's not much interest in joining the municipal system. And it says there was some interest, but it was actually pretty minor. One or two comments we received expressed an interest in potentially being part of the system, but the vast majority no interest. And that no interest really came as a result of, I think, a number of feelings. One was that people were concerned about being forced to connect to the municipal system. They felt that if they're not on the system now, they have an investment in their private wells and so on that is important. They're concerned about the cost that they might incur to connect. And there's a perception among those who are not connected that that their water quality is fine, that they don't need this, and that it would really be an unnecessary cost. So there was quite a pretty consistent response, and that's sort of the general flavor of it. The response is really from about 40 properties out of 400 properties or so in Shakespeare. So next slide. We did get input responses back from some agencies that include the Health Unit, Conservation Authority, First Nations, but really it was pretty much standard responses, form letter responses. Please keep us informed. So there's really nothing that came out of that comment that would really affect the project in any significant way. So next slide. So what to kind of set the scene for what we're doing here, I wanted to very briefly describe for council the existing system. It served from 2 wells on the same site on Miller Avenue. The wells are drilled more or less to the same depth and so on, and one well serves as a backup to the other. It's about 160 properties connected. We believe that at the current usage rates, those existing wells could serve approximately 248 properties. So there is capacity remaining. It's clear that treatment for both arsenic and iron is required. The arsenic treatment is required essentially by law. There's a timeline related to that. Iron is required because it's a significant aesthetic problem on the water supply and relates to a lot of, believe the opinion that the water isn't very good. Mechanically, the system's pretty good, but it needs additional pressure tanks in the pump house to manage pump cycling and so on. And the most important thing, I think, is that the system does not support fire protection. It in no way contributes to fire protection for the community of Shakespeare. It was not built to do that based on the existing facilities and can't be done that. And that's something we're paying attention to going forward. So next slide. So I'll talk a bit about the existing well site because it relates to, one of the alternatives I'll talk about later is providing treatment for arsenic and iron at the existing well site. Site is very narrow. It's only about 6 meters wide, just barely wider than the pump house that it sits on. If we were to add treatment there, we would have to more than double the footprint of the existing footprint of the building. More importantly, and I'll explain this in more detail, is that we would have to provide some storage within the building for filter backwashing purposes, and that would really cause us to have a building height that is equivalent of 2 stories, more than 7 meters. And that is a direct result of the fact that the site is very narrow. We know that to expand, even to add an addition to the building, we would have to make extensive renovations to the existing electrical system. And we know from the time that well 2 was constructed, that one of the disadvantages of the site, or negatives, is that it only has single phase power. And a lot of the equipment that would normally be put in a system like this, and certainly the equipment that would be put in for treatment and so on, really would be served better with 3-phase power. So next slide. So this is a picture. This is really to give council an idea of the space constraints available. We've got a garage on one side, a house on another, big tree. We're looking from the back, really at the back of the pump house, and that is well 2 in the foreground there. So this picture was taken shortly after well 2 was brought into service, but it's really showing that the site is quite constrained, and to do anything further here would involve encroaching on the neighboring properties and really requiring permission to do that. So next slide. So in an environmental assessment, you're primarily doing 2 things. And one is the communication, getting input from stakeholders. And then the second part is looking at alternatives. What can you do? What can you do to solve your problem, or what can you do to create your opportunity? And so these are the phase 2 alternatives. This is looking back to that sort of 5-phase EA slide. The first alternative is that we could provide treatment for arsenic and iron at the existing well site. So that's possible, and I'll talk about that. Or alternatively, we could provide treatment at an alternative site that hopefully would maximize future opportunities. That would be the principal reason for going, one of the key reasons, I guess, for going to an alternative site. Thirdly, in theory, we could do nothing. That's a requirement that we're in the EA process, we're required to carry through. In reality, you have to, as a minimum here, provide treatment. You really can't avoid doing that. The province, the law is that there's a certain limit on arsenic concentrations, and that has to be addressed. So what is important there on the, yeah, thank you. In the alternatives, could we go back to the previous slide, please? Yeah, what I want to point out here, and I'll talk about this further, is that there's nothing in these alternatives that about expanding the distribution system. There's nothing in these alternatives about requiring people to connect to the water system. That's not what we are examining through this process. And I wanted to point that out because a lot of the 40 odd comments we received, really, that was a large part of the concerns. So next slide. So I'm going to talk about now about alternative one, which is providing treatment at the existing site. To treat for arsenic and iron, we're really going to filter it, filter those compounds out of the water. In prior work, we've done treatability studies and looked at different ways it might be done. But in the end, it's essentially a filter. And the filter would remove the arsenic and iron, right? Not remove it completely, but remove it down to quite acceptable levels. If you have a filter, you periodically have to backwash it, flush it backwards, and to remove the arsenic and iron and so on. And in our particular case, the only source of water that we would have to backwash with would be water that we have already treated. And we would need to store that water in that building expansion in a tank that is quite large, quite tall, and really is the key reason why we would need to build a building close to 25 feet tall. But in theory, it's possible to do it. And that building extension would be on the north side of the existing pump house. So next slide. So what in the top left, what you're doing is looking down on top of the what the facility would be. So there's a rectangle there at the bottom. That's the existing well house. It has a number of pressure tanks, the electrical controls. Well one is located in there. And we would add a slightly larger addition out to the north, out towards the back. You see the circle there, that is the backwash storage tank, and a series of smaller circles that are pressure tanks and the actual filters to remove the arsenic and iron. So in terms of looking down a footprint, that's what you would have. And the lower left is what you would see from Miller Avenue. And you would see quite a tall structure at the back. And then on the lower right, it's a side view. So, and inside that side view, we have sort of tried to capture the scale dimensions of the backwash storage tank. So that is that is in very general, simple terms, what we would have. So next slide. So we put together this 3D image to give a sense of what this might look like at this location. So you see the smaller existing pump house out front. The white thing out front is actually the generator that sits there, and our building addition would be on the back. In order to build that addition, we believe we would need the agreement of all three adjacent property owners, just simply for access. There is no way to access the rear of the existing pump house to build anything without the permission of the neighbors. So next slide. So in terms of the existing site, there's I think three important conclusions. It can be done, but it can't be done without the agreement of the adjacent property owners. Secondly, if we do it, we feel we can serve up to 248 customers from that location, and that is the limitation is the existing well capacity. It's 160 served now. We could serve up to 248. And we believe the cost of providing the filtration equipment, the storage tank, the building expansion, and all the things that go with it would be in the order of about $1.9 million. So next slide. So now I'm going to talk about, okay, if we don't build it at the existing site, provide treatment there, what could we provide treatment at a different location? What would be involved in doing that? And so the first thing we did was identify municipally owned sites and sites that municipally owned and private that might provide adequate space and be feasible for providing treatment at. And then once we identified those potential locations, we looked at who would benefit from what we looked at what we might build there, who would benefit from what we would build, and what will it cost. So it's really a two-step process. First step was to look at different places we might do this, the where question, and then really get into part two, which is more the what question. What would we provide? So next slide, please. And this is just a simple map showing the limits of Shakespeare. The dashed line is the developable, the limits of the developable area. You see a blue circle dot near the top. That is the existing well location north of Miller Avenue. So we looked at 4 possible locations to provide treatment. Number one, just on the property immediately to the north of the well site. There's been some indication that the owner there, that is private property, but the owner has over time expressed some interest in possibly selling part of the property to the township for purposes of the well site. The second location we looked at was an existing municipally owned lot that extends from Stevenson Street through to the highway. And it's about 20 meters wide, and I have a picture of it later, but you'll see there's right now the only thing on that property is a sidewalk that connects Stevenson Street to the highway. It's vacant, maintained by the township. We then went across the road and on the southeast corner of the county road and the highway, northeast corner, southeast corner, right. There's municipally owned property larger than Site 2 that it was a possibility, and we looked at that. Currently, it's a lot of that area is really a parking area. And the last time I was there, it was there had been commercial development there, and a building exists there, but the buildings, I believe, were vacant. And then the fourth location we looked at was where the community center is. That's where the municipal wastewater treatment plant is at the present time. It's a very large area, a lot of open space, parking, and so on, and would easily accommodate any plans or with regard to expansion of the water system. So those are the four locations. Just before we leave this slide, in order to provide treatment at a site other than the existing site, we would have to build a water pipe that we would call a raw water. It would carry raw water, untreated water, from the well to either location 2, 3, or 4, or even 1. So we pay attention to where these locations are relative to the well site, because there's a cost related to connecting the two together. Once we treated the water, we could then reconnect to the closest point of the distribution system. So next slide. So we considered all 4 of these sites, and really with the focus on narrowing it down to one, which one was the most practical. Site 1 is, which is private property, would need to be purchased, but it's quite handy. It's right adjacent to the well site. So our water main, raw water main, would be pretty short. It's an obvious advantage. The disadvantage of this location is that there's a house there already on the majority of the property. So it's still constrained in total area and total width. It's better, we would have more space than the existing well site, but it's still quite constrained. We could provide treatment facilities, but we could not provide a reservoir. We could take that tall storage tank and really have a sort of a 2-level building with a lower level, and we wouldn't have to have as tall a building, but we would still have the storage tank inside the building. So looking at all those things, this site is only marginally better than the existing site. It's marginally better because it's just a little bit bigger. Site 2, between Stevenson Street and the highway, it's owned by the township. We believe we could build a reservoir on that site sufficient to provide fire protection for the community. Really anything that we would want to do in terms of an enhancement of the water system at this stage can be done on that site. I make the point here that it's not suitable to be a future well site. And one of the criteria or considerations we made is that if we were building facilities at somewhere other than the existing location, we should think about the possibility that maybe someday there would be a 3rd well in Shakespeare. And so if a site had the opportunity for a 3rd well, to be the site of a 3rd well, then that would, give it some higher weighting. But that particular site is not suitable to be a well site, really for two reasons. There's a history of contamination in properties, some properties along the highway. There's historical evidence that there's been spills, and even if there weren't, it right adjacent to a very busy transportation corridor creates the potential for future contamination that you would not want to put a well site at risk. So for those reasons, we don't feel that it would be a suitable well site. Next slide. Site 3, which is really just across the road. It's very similar to Site 2. It's a little larger, where construction would be a little easier, but it really has no advantage over Site 2. It would be, because it's further away from the wells, and particularly because it's on the opposite side of the highway, it would be more expensive to develop and get to. And it has the same issues with respect to it. It couldn't be a future well site. We also felt that using that site for treatment purposes, building a building, could interfere with any future commercial use of the site. So particularly, and I guess the key thing is that it offers no advantages over the site on the north side of the highway. And Site 4, it's owned by the township. It's easily big enough to build a reservoir and do whatever we would need in terms of initial and future facilities. So it's quite attractive from that regard. It also has the potential to be suitable as a future well site. We had a hydrogeologist examine the well records from that are published by the province for the community of Shakespeare, and there's dozens and dozens of the records of wells. That records are created when a well is drilled initially, and he examined all those well records and felt that if, in terms of the quantity of supply, it looks like the further south you go in the community, the wells have more potential to be a municipal scale supply than in the north part of the community. So if in all 4 of these locations, we were going to actually have a future well or drill a well, Site 4 of the 4 locations would be the preferred location to look at hydrogeologically, and it's much better from a risk standpoint in terms of contamination. So, next slide. So we're working our way to determining what would be a preferred location. So Site 1, which is adjacent to the existing pump house, really does not create any opportunities for us, any significant opportunity. It's still constrained in size. It's slightly larger than the existing site, but and we could actually, build a building that was shorter, but it beyond that, it doesn't create any additional benefit to the system. Site 3 has no advantages over Site 2. So Site 4 has the advantage of being a potential well site, but a third well is not required now. And it's quite far. It's 1.2 kilometers from the existing wells, which means it would have the longest raw water pipeline. And by not building the reservoir at that location, we still have the opportunity to drill a third well there in the future, and take that pipe, raw water pipe, from that location to the treatment location. So we haven't really lost anything by not proceeding with Site 4, and it would be the most costly to develop. So really, through a process of elimination, we feel Site 2 is the preferred location. It's big enough, and it's reasonably close to the existing wells. Next slide. So this is what that site looks like. We're looking from across the highway, looking towards Stevenson Street. It's grass maintained by the township, and there's a sidewalk on the east side that connects the two roadways. So that's the space available. It is majority of the lot is 20 meters, say 66 feet wide. It's actually wider at the front. There's a bit of a triangle at the front. So that's the property that we feel, if the decision is to put the treatment somewhere other than the existing site, this would be the preferred location. So next slide. So now that we've established the where, we began to look at what might we build there? What are the alternatives or the options? And this is where we really are encroaching into what would be considered phase 3 of the Class EA. This is going beyond what you're sort of legislatively required to do, which is just up to phase 2. But in order for you to actually make a decision, we believe that this information was critical. So we looked at identified 4 things that could be built there. Each one is progressively adding more to kind of a base scenario. 2A, option 2A, is that we could, instead of having the treatment system at the existing well site, we just build a building and put it at that location. We're not recommending that you do this. It'll explain that it really creates no advantage to doing that, but it's sort of the base case. It can be done. We don't have space constraints, and you could build everything that you can build at the existing well site. You could build there, and that would be the 2A option. In 2B, what we would do is actually build a concrete reservoir under the footprint of the treatment building, essentially a basement that would be a water tank, concrete tank, and then we would take the water from the existing well sites, treat it, discharge it into the reservoir, and then with pumps, pump out of the reservoir and into the system. So that's in 2B, all we're doing over 2A is adding a reservoir. In 2C, we're starting to move into the opportunities related to fire protection. And we could, in that same building, provide fire pumps that would provide, and we refer to it as partial fire protection. design guidelines published by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, MECP, identify for different sizes of communities how much water storage you should have for fire protection. And in 2C, we would not be meeting that full requirement. We'd be about 50% of it or slightly less. But regardless, it's still a significant reservoir of water, far more than you have now. And it would provide for the whole community partial fire protection. 2D is actually constructing then a larger reservoir, one that would meet the guideline requirements for the recommended number of storage, amount of storage, and it would have the fire pumps, treatment system, all the bells and whistles that 2C has, but a bigger reservoir. So next slide. So in what we have here is an attempt to summarize what the alternatives are, what we feel the probable costs would be, and the number of customers that might benefit from what we would build. So option one is building on the existing site. That's all, the original alternative one. We're limited in terms of the advantage is that it's slightly less cost here, you can see. And the number of benefiting customers is potentially 248, limited by the capacity of the wells. And the probable cost, 1,910,000. 2A, second row there, is putting that same treatment system at site 2. The advantage of this is that we would not require any agreement of adjacent property owners. We wouldn't need easements or property purchases or whatever. We don't create any increase in capacity. It's still the same 248. And the costs are just marginally more, about 3.5% more. And if we, in option one at the existing site, if we were required to purchase easements, then these costs might actually be very, very similar, and maybe site 2A could potentially be cheaper, but it's not significantly more expensive. It'll be easier to construct the facilities there. We'll have the extra cost of a pipeline to come over there, but it's not a great distance. 2B is we're adding a reservoir. So we've got a significant additional cost to add a reservoir, about an additional $400,000. The real benefit comes from the fact that we can now, with a reservoir, serve 436 potential customers. And the reason is that in the existing system, because there's no storage, we have to supply water at the peak rate of use. Peak rate of use occurs in the morning around breakfast time, in the evening around dinner time. It can occur as a result of lawn watering or whatever at any time of the day. But with a reservoir, the reservoir provides a buffer. We can meet those peak demands by pumping out of the reservoir, and the well itself pumps at a really constant rate. So we increase the number of customers we could potentially service by adding a reservoir by about 75%. And then 2C is adding fire protection. We'd still get the benefit in terms of the same number of properties, 436. The cost of fire pumps is about another $250,000 or so. And the pumps and the electrical controls, power supply, and so on that would go with it. So that's kind of the first level of fire protection. And then if we went to the full-size reservoir, option 2D, we'd be a $2,850,000. Again, is in the difference is just purely the cost of the larger reservoir. So those are what we feel the costs relative to those different things. The key points I think in this are, as soon as you build a reservoir, you increase the capacity of the system dramatically. And I guess the second point is that it isn't really costing us much more to go to site 2. And if there's a property cost at the existing well site, then site 2 could be cheaper. So next slide. And this is really to give you a sense of what things might look like there. And this is the 2D option that shows a reservoir extending out beyond the limits of the building. So we have a building out front with a treatment system, fire pumps, what we call high lift system pumps, and a reservoir underneath, which is, a lot like a basement. On the right-hand side of that diagram, we show the sort of the limits of the property, and it's shaped a bit like a boot, 20 meters wide for most of it, and it shows where the treatment building would be, and then the reservoir, extending out the back. And I think what's important here is that there's the potential to even expand the reservoir beyond current needs. So the site is plenty big enough for what we want to do. So next slide. So this is just an attempt to give you kind of a 3D perspective on what it might look like at that location, the scale of it relative to the adjacent property, and so on. Next slide is a little better picture, really. Yeah, gives you a sense. This is what it would look like, and the reservoir would extend out beyond the back of the building if we went for option 2D. Those are windows in the front, provide some lighting and so on, but access would be from the side. So that's just to give, there's a lot of different things that can be done to enhance the appearance of the building, but that's just to give some sense of what would be there. So next slide. So so far we have been talking about total costs, and in my experience, people are more interested in what's their personal cost going to be, what's the cost per customer or per property or whatever. So that was one of the reasons we wanted to look at cost allocation. Cost allocation is not a requirement of the environmental assessment process. We're really going beyond that here, but it's the information that is often of most interest. So we wanted to bring forward some ideas of what a possible allocation of costs might look like. And ultimately how costs are allocated is entirely at the discretion of council. There's some rules around that in the municipal act and so on, but by and large, the principles for allocation, the council would decide. But we had, in order to come up with the per property estimates, we had to make some assumptions or sort of basic principles. And the first one is that the grant money that has tentatively been allocated here, federal and provincial grants, of about $1 million, almost $1.1 million, has been applied to create the estimates that I'll talk about in a further slide. So we're assuming you're going to get the grant. The second point, and it's really a key point, is that any property receiving benefit should contribute. If there's no benefit, then you shouldn't have to contribute. But if there is a benefit to a property, there should be a requirement to contribute. So that's part of the assumptions we're going forward here. And in terms of benefit, there is really three considerations. Any users of the system, users now or in the future, that 160 or the 248 or 436 or whatever, however many there are going to benefit from the treatment system. It's going to provide better water. So there's, for users, everyone gets a benefit from better treatment. There is a benefit to the opportunity for growth. So if we can make this system serve 436 users versus 248, then we believe all the users benefit. You would benefit. I mean, there would be, if I was an existing user, I might question, how do I benefit from growth? Well, the more users, the less operating cost per user. So that is where the benefit comes from growth, is a sort of a distribution of costs over a larger area. And if the system is built to provide fire protection, then the community, anybody in the community, not just the users of the water system, really benefits from having enhanced fire protection. The fourth point there is that when we talk about benefiting properties, some of these may be lots that are approved and developed in the future. They may not exist today. And those particular properties would be growth. They may be existing developed properties that choose to connect that aren't connected now. So there's kind of two categories there. But the benefit, we've defined the benefit as extending to future users, not just the 160. Point 5 is that, and really point 6 as well. When we allocated the costs, we started out first with allocating the treatment cost, and then looked at what's the cost to provide capacity for growth, and allocated that on top of the cost for treatment. And then thirdly, what's the cost to add fire protection, and add that as a third component. So there's an incremental increase in costs, but the base cost is treatment, and then we build on that. So it's not a case of taking the total cost and dividing it overall the properties, and it's kind of a fine line in terms of how it look, but we've looked at this in what I would call an incremental cost basis. Now, before we move on, I want to emphasize two things. How costs are allocated for this is not part of the environmental assessment. It's information for council. The environmental assessment is focusing on what could and should be built and where it would be built and so on. But it's not a requirement of the EA process to decide how costs would be allocated. So we're not doing that here, but it's information that's available to us. And the second point I want to add here is that when we're talking about allocating costs and so on, there's nothing in here about expanding the distribution system or making people connect. That's not part of these costs. There's no water main, treated water main costs in any of these numbers. So next slide. So that was kind of principles 1 to 7. And now the most important ones I left to last here is that, so the proceeds of any grants received for arsenic treatment are applied to any properties that might benefit, including future customers. So in theory, if we go for an option that has a reservoir, there could potentially be 436 properties that connect. And we've made the presentation here is that all those properties benefit equally from that grant. The second point is that number 9 is that the costs related to growth are applied to the existing customers as well as future customers. And I had already talked about this on the previous slide, that existing customers might feel that they don't benefit from growth, but it's our opinion that they do because of the potential reduction in the allocation of operating costs, essentially your quarterly or monthly water charge. And the 10th point is that fire protection costs can be applied to the entire community, because the benefit is not dependent on connection to the water system. The water system is enhanced, is capable of distributing water throughout the community, a significant quantity, so it provides improved fire protection for the whole community, but you don't have to be connected to the system to achieve that benefit. So next slide. So here's where we begin to look at the allocation of costs and the potential per property or per customer costs. And we established that we felt there was 3 property classes. There's the existing connected customers, 160 of them. There are developed properties that are not connected, which is about 240 of them. And there's future connections that's up to a maximum of 436. And those future connections can be future lots that are created. They could be lots developed as infill, or they could be existing developed lots where people choose to connect. So those future connections are kind of a broad group because it can draw from a couple of options. The cost per property are on the right-hand column. And what you're really seeing is that if you move from the existing site to option 2D, costs increase, and it's really a reflection of the physical facilities get more and more elaborate as we work our way down through that list. The costs do not increase dramatically, but they definitely increase. Second thing I wanted to point out here is that the top costs in the top group are the same as the costs in the bottom group. So the existing customers and the future customers would be expected to pay the same. And the reason is that once you connect, you get the same benefit as an existing customer. What would be important here is that the township would likely have to borrow money to finance the works until those future customers come along. So there would be an interest charge. So the expectation is future customers would have to pay interest on top of these numbers. So if you connect in the future, you'll pay more than these numbers, but the difference will largely be interest. Now, in the middle group, what we've done here for the developed properties not connected is if council chooses, and this is a decision that council would make, is that to allocate some or all, in this case, all of the fire protection costs to the whole community. Those costs are in option 2C, just under $600 one time, and 2D, just over $1,100 one time. So that's what, those are the costs related to fire protection. And those same amounts are built into the total costs that are in the other groups as well. They're not an additional, but that's the cost of fire protection, or of creating fire protection. So next slide. So we've started this EA process. We've looked at alternatives, sort of high-level alternatives. What might be built and where. Generated a fair bit of detail. We've even gone one step further and looked at what the potential per customer, per property costs are. And that's beyond the EA requirement. It's not something that council needs to decide at this time. And out of that, we have, reached what we believe is the preferred alternative. And the preferred alternative is to build the facilities with a reservoir at Site 2. And it would be important to make a decision on whether it was option 2B, 2C, or 2D that was preferred, but really it could be any of them in terms of what we're presenting here. But the preference is, rather than attempting to provide facilities at the existing site, to build it at site 2. So we're hoping that council can choose a preferred alternative so that we can get on with the design and, more importantly, get on with securing the grant funding for this. Then steps 2 to 7 here are really completing the EA process. In 2, we advise the residents and the agencies, First Nations and so on, what council believes is the preferred alternative, and how, in terms of the residents, council can decide what format do you want to use to advise them. It's your choice. But that they would be advised of what council has chosen. We would finalize all of that in what we call a screening report, circulate that report, get feedback from everybody that has an interest. There would be a final notice, groups that are given an opportunity to comment. That's what I refer to as the review period, a month or so to comment on what is being proposed. And then, based on all of the input we have up to 0.5, council would then confirm the preferred alternative and publish the notice that the EA is complete. But again, I want to emphasize that the cost allocation piece does not have to be part of this. The EA is really more about the physical facilities. So I think at this point, if there's questions, I'll do my best to answer them. But thank you.
Okay, questions, Amanda?
Steve, thank you for the very thorough presentation. A lot of information for us to digest. And I believe you mentioned this, but I want to make sure I'm crystal clear, and also for the concerned citizens that are watching. So out of all of the options, would current well owners have to hook up to the system, or would they be able to keep their wells?
There's nothing in the work that we've done that considers or discusses making anybody connect. This is about enhancements to the existing system. It's not about making private well owners connect. That's not what we studied.
So Steve, just so I'm really crystal clear on this, yes or no, would they have to hook up in any of the options, current well owners, to the system? I understand we talked about the study in terms of the scope, but I think there is a lot of concern, and I just want to make sure that's crystal clear. It's just a yes or no answer, if you would.
The decision is up to council. It's not a decision I can make. I can only talk about what we were asked to study and what we studied, but who has to connect or is connected is a decision of council. But I want to reinforce that we have not presented any information here that would even allow council, I think, to make a good decision on making people connect. It's not what we studied. I'm not trying to avoid the answer. It's just that it's not I don't have the authority to say yes or no. That's really the council's decision. Yeah.
How about I phrase the question a different way? Out of the options presented, if council were to hypothetically decide that we didn't want to force private well owners to hook up to the system, is that a feasible option out of the options that were studied?
Is it feasible to not require people
Correct.
to connect? Yes, it's definitely feasible
Okay, thank
to
you.
not require.
Okay, Daryl?
Yeah, no, great. Thanks. Definitely a lot to digest. It's been a busy weekend. Yeah, trying to farm and harvest and a million phone calls and emails, but it's all worthy. A lot to take in here. First of all, there's a little confusion. The three-phase power, this might have to, Wes might have to hop in here. Is the three-phase power on 7 and 8, or does it run north and south up and down 107? And are we going to have to bring the three-phase over to the option 2 potentially as well? Can somebody help me there?
Wes or Jake?
I'm not exactly sure. Even if it was on 107, it wouldn't be that far down to, it's only 2 lots there to the vacant lot.
Okay, yeah, no, okay, it's similar in distance, definitely not much farther, and same amount of work as the existing site. There's mass confusion with fire security in the community. I'm going to be blunt, I'm going to be honest. We are in code, or by the provincial standards, we're acceptable, but we see a lot about fire, high lift pumps, fire security. I look at the north end, we're putting tanks in as, say, Millbank expands, other little hamlets. We do have existing tanks in the village. There's just this little claw in this report everywhere, even highlighted in red, about fire security and tanks. There's confusion going on. Are we in compliance at this point? Is what I need to ask. I may have to direct that to Chief Hunter.
If
Go
I
ahead,
can,
Steve. Yep.
yeah, I think the fire chief will have to answer. But in terms of the water system, there is no requirement for a water system to provide fire protection. It's normally done. And if you're going to do it, then there are requirements as to how you do it. Just things as simple as the placing of hydrants and so on. So, but the actual water system design rules do not require fire protection. But there's probably other provincial requirements that would. And then I'll defer to the fire chief.
Thanks, Steve. And Councillor Herlick, we basically treat any fire in the Shakespeare area no different than we would with a rural fire. There is no municipal fire protection as far as water. We have to truck all of our water in, other than the tank that is at the Shakespeare Fire Station, and that's the same size tank that we've been putting in various locations out in the rural area. The issue with fire flows is, in the event of a large fire, standards have established minimum fire flows to extinguish a fire. We aren't capable to truck that amount of water with the equipment that we have now, and that's why having reservoirs or pressurized municipal systems give you that enhanced fire flow, which then property owners can then apply to their insurance providers and say that they are in a municipally protected area as far as water. if that answers your question.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, it's a little complex, but yeah, it's clear we're good, but we're not. It's not the best. Okay, no, interesting for sure. And just the last one, I'll finish off here. So the date for the grant money here, there was some rumblings and confusion there. It looks like 2026 is the cutoff for the grant. So we can all breathe a little bit here. That's relieving. That being said, we need to go forward. I understand that. And yeah, it's a lot to decide here. There's concern now, the hamlet exploding into almost the size of Baden, and then we're back to dealing with the Highway 7 and 8 expansion or new roads. And this is where this heads if Shakespeare explodes. We know Shakespeare explodes in size. We're back to the drawing board. And at that point, I feel they will push a road through wherever they simply want. So there's a lot here to digest. That being said, we've seen the grant cut off. We have a little breathing room here. I'll leave the floor open for a couple more. Thank you.
Jeremy, go ahead.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions here to follow up, but the cost allocations, total cost allocations we're looking at here, ranging from $0 to $4,100. If you're an existing user of the system and you're updating the system for the arsenic and iron treatment, are those cost allocations not picked up by our water capital surcharges? Or I guess maybe this is a question for the treasurer, perhaps. Like, are we going to be going to the water user for these amounts, or are they going to get picked up by the capital funds that we collect from people every month on the water system? That's my first question.
I can't not attempting to answer for the treasurer, but the capital surcharges likely relate to the replacement of the existing works. So what we are doing here is adding facilities to the existing system. So the money that has been raised and put in reserves is for the future replacement of the existing works, what's there today. It wasn't put in reserves to provide arsenic treatment. So does that?
Yeah.
But how that money is used is at the discretion of council.
Paula, do you have anything you wish to add?
I would just agree with Steve's comments on that. The current reserves, capital reserves, don't provide for enhancements. It's exactly the replacement of the existing assets. However, you do have the DCs now, which would provide for part of the growth part of it, if you're gonna choose to expand for growth. Outside of that, you could use existing reserves to fund the project and return to the reserves.
Are we allowed to do that? Like, is there legislation governing what money we spend on water systems, or is that our own rules that we've kind of created from within?
Yeah, the allocation for reserves for us is based on our TCAs and the infrastructure deficits within the asset management plan.
Sorry, what does TCA mean?
Tangible capital assets, sorry.
Okay. That's okay.
And so that is denoted in the asset management plan, the infrastructure deficit for the various categories of assets. And that's how the township has allocated for their capital reserves and structured their reserve balances goals.
So the money that we see here on the total cost allocation is for upgrading the system only based on the options we have presented to us. It also does not include any expansion of the water mains or the water lines, which I presume if we chose option 2B to 2D, any one of those three, that's assuming the eventuality of the expansion of the water system, which is going to generate another significant charge, kind of like what happened, I don't know, a dozen years ago, 15 years ago, whenever we upgraded or put in the sewers there. Is that correct as well?
Yes, I believe previously there is that Shakespeare sewer debenture out there from the ratepayers, the systems that are the properties that are hooked up. That's coming to an end, is my understanding. That's getting paid off this year. So those charges will stop in 2022.
Okay. I think I have just one more question then. The fire system charge then, we'd be in effect, if we go with 2C or 2D, everyone's being charged for the expansion, sort of for the availability of those increased fire services, but that would not actually be available. So until the entire system expanded with water mains and water lines, is that correct? So someone could pay the, I don't know, $1,125 on a developed property not connected, and then not actually benefit from that until the water main goes past their house. Is that right?
I don't believe the water main would have to go past your house. There would, to achieve real benefit, there would have to be fire hydrants added to the existing system. And that could be done at strategic locations, but the water main wouldn't actually have to go by your house. You would ideally you would want to be reasonable distance to a fire hydrant, but the fire chief, I'm sure, would have thoughts on that as well.
But it would probably involve expanding the water mains or the water lines to new locations in order to pick up everyone who's paying that surcharge. If we're asking people to pay that surcharge or that cost allocation, we can't not extend that and not give them and have no fire services to those locations, I think. Anyways, that's just a point. I think we all see what I'm getting at there, I hope. My last question then is to Steve. 2A, when I read through the report, I thought 2A seemed a reasonable sort of compromise based on what the city or what the town, wants versus fixing the issue that's currently there. Is that system, in eventuality, is that expandable? If the decade goes down the road, I see those drawings. Yeah, you want to have the reservoir underneath when you get into 2B, 2C, or 2D. But is 2A expandable? Let's say we fix the issue we have now, we build that property with using 2A. Can that, in, let's say, a decade, when the water system, when there's demand for that water system, is 2A expandable to service the whole community?
No, 2A can only provide service to, I always get my numbers wrong here, 248 properties, because 2A is providing treatment only for the existing wells. So you would be restricted to 248, and you could still, in the future, on that property, expand the pump house that would be built for 2A and do some of the things that we've shown here. But because the property is big enough, we're not limiting ourselves in that regard. But it's important that 2A only provides treatment for the capacity of the existing wells.
And well, plus 88 more.
Well, 100, that's the 160 plus 88. That's correct.
Right. And so that system with it, if we chose to go ahead with 2A, and a decade down the road, there is the possibility that additional with that space, that you could expand that space and make it available to service the entire community. That's what I'm hearing here.
In terms of the space available, yes, you would have space to do that. You can't do it at the costs that we presented here. It would cost substantially more because you're almost going then, and after you've built 2A, you're going to build a large part of 2B.
Right. I mean, I when I read the report and listen to what's going on here, I think, you know, initially 2A is where I fall. In a way, we've got, without knowing what the cost, when we choose 2B to 2D, we're assuming the eventuality of the expansion of that system to fit the whole community, I think. And without knowing the cost of that system for, you know, I think last time when I was on council, you know, 15 years ago, whatever it was, when we put those, when we put the sewers in, and that was, I think, 2/3 funded. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was 2/3 funded to put the sewer system in. That was from the feds in the province, and the connector was still paying around $6,500. And without knowing what those connection fees would be and sort of the cost of the system, timelines, I'm a little I'm hesitant to go along with 2B to 2D, because we're just assuming the eventuality of that happening without knowing what those numbers might be. So that's my entire piece. No more questions. Thanks.
I'd like to, if I could, clarify though that there's nothing built in terms of the allocation per property that we've set out here. There's no assumption about future expansion of the system built into those per property costs. And actually 2B and 2C are cheaper per property than 2A.
But they're not in eventuality when the system actually goes into service the new connectors, right? That's going to be millions of dollars worth on that project too. Anyways, that's fine. I got the answers I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else with questions? Andrew?
Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, a lot of questions, even just from the comments from council members. So I'll try and keep it brief, if that's even possible. So, Mr. Burns, thank you very much for coming. It's always insightful as usual and very detailed. It is a lot of work, and I know you guys have been working hard to help us out, and we thank you. So the arsenic filter portion, no matter what the equipment that we're going to be using has already been decided at the Clean Water Institute. Everybody went and studied it and said this is kind of the direction we want to go. Would it be all the same for every building that we build, like the same physical dimensions and capacity, or will they all be different depending on what we build?
The actual treatment part would be the same regardless of where we put it. The key difference would be that we need someplace to store water for backwash purposes. And if you build a concrete reservoir, then that's where that backwash water comes from. If you don't build a reservoir, then you need a tank inside the building. But so there's that kind of key difference.
Thank you. If I may just keep going, Margaret's. Thank you. So why could there not be a reservoir built at site 1? I know I see it on the drawing for site 2. Is there or possibly like a lowered foundation like we have at the pump house in Stratford on Romeo Street. They're physically lowered to drop building height, I would imagine, or fit equipment. Is that a possibility in a design?
I don't believe there is the possibility of building a lower level at the existing site. Could be done at site one, the property to the north. But when you dig a hole, you need there's rules around slopes and so on, and we'd be encroaching significantly into the adjacent properties. Now, if they were all in agreement with that, if the adjacent properties were okay with it, it might be feasible, but even then it would be tight. We're not very far from the garage on the west side, so it'd be tight.
Yeah, I was up there today stepping everything off. It looks like we have a 7-meter building with a 14 to 16 meter, the way I measure meter, distance between that and the next wellhead. So it's almost 3 times the footprint. I'm just wondering if there's some opportunity, hoping there's some opportunity, depending on which way council goes, to maybe utilize that a little more. And this with the 3-phase power requirement, I know it's a nice to have. I'm not sure the details, and it's not really a council member's concern, but I know technologically wise, single phase, which is basically 220 or 240, can be converted with most motor inverters to 3-phase power. So was that considered in this case? I keep hearing about it, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Is motor inverter, motor starter being the conversion unit to 3-phase?
Yeah, we can put the treatment system in there with single phase power. The type of equipment and so on would, you have more choice, better, and I think better equipment, lower energy costs with 3-phase power. So it's definitely preferred. It's not absolutely necessary.
Perfect, thank you. I know it looks like the power must come from the road there, if I'm not mistaken. So it's maybe about 20 meters to the existing building, correct?
Approximately. It's all in that Miller Avenue. All the power is buried.
Yep.
And there's no overhead. And so if we were actually to try and have 3-phase power there, it would have to come all the way from the county road. And
or we could use the motor inverters that convert it. I'm wondering the Site 2 construction specifically. I know Councillor from Mornington briefly spoke to it. So there is something preventing from building on to that in the future, or it would just be a matter of expansion, or is it an improbability to move forward with any expansion at that Site 2, say 2A was selected by council? So there's no probability in the future, if growth is desired, to expand that or plan to expand it. When editing some pipes and all that good stuff and laying out the building in a way that it could be expanded, or is that a strong possibility that it can be expanded in the future?
If you were to build 2A, you could still go back and do 2B on 2B, or yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Certainly 2B and probably 2C on that same location, but it would cost you close to the costs we're showing here for 2B as a future cost, in addition to the cost of 2A.
Sure, and yeah, we could, if that was a huge development going in, I'm sure that could be allocated to the developer possibly, or other ways. So Site 4, we talked about it. It's directly beside the rail line, and I know you're not suggesting it as a preferred option, There's some nasty stuff goes around that rail line. I'm wondering if there's a contamination risk there. I know there in the past, many years ago, there's been accidents, very infrequent, but on the train tracks, it seems to be a bit of a liability to have any consideration there. What's your opinion on that, Mr. Burns?
It's certain if when we get to the point, or the community gets to the point where it's looking for a location for another well, then yeah, the railroad tracks is definitely something to pay attention to.
Yeah, and I appreciate your comments, sir, on when you said that we need to consider the long-term interests of the community. I wholly agree that we do definitely need to consider the long-term interests of the community. So the number 436 that we were reading here, so there's 160 existing well users and then another 240. So we're pretty well at that number if you include the existing, what would we call them, developed properties. That's correct? Is that, am I reading that right? That 436, I know in the calculations, it looks like it includes it too. So that would be the developed properties on wells currently. Is that accurate assessment?
It's my understanding that there's about 400 developed properties. And if we were to build a reservoir, we could service 436 properties. So they're just.
Perfect. I just want to understand the number. It wasn't clear. And I just have a question, and I hope you can answer it. And it's a little bit outside, but you mentioned briefly about the other EA that was just strictly for the northern one. So it appeared on the website in April of 7th of 21. So it took about a year, looks like, to complete that report. We did a good job getting on it. You know, I see in our budget line, I'm not sure if that or this whole project was about $500,000 to look at the EA. It came out with the preferred selection at Miller Ave, and I think that's what you spoke to. And then from there, I'm a little fuzzy on what happened. The study document, the ESR final, reads, a study recommendation to this effect was presented and supported by staff and council of the Township of Perth East. I looked, and I haven't had a chance to ask staff, but did PM Ross bring that presentation to council? I apologize if I didn't see it, but I'm looking for it. Is it available, the report to council, or?
I don't recall. I don't remember presenting the report to council.
I just found that this morning. It actually says presented and supported by staff and council of the Township of Perth East. So that's kind of why I'm asking. If there is one, maybe we can have it forwarded. And I apologize if I missed it. I didn't see it anywhere. Yeah, so as far as expansion through the village, so the maximum that anything in 2 would be able to provide, because it can't do a well, would be 436. Is that correct? Or so that's the absolute maximum number of customers, I guess, would be 436. So that's existing municipal plus the well owners plus it looks like 40 houses or 36 houses. So is that just so I understand it correctly? So that would be correct, or sorry?
Well, with 2A, it's a lesser number. It's 232. I keep wanting to say 236, but
yes,
248.
I apologize.
248. With
Okay.
2A, if we only treat the water, if we don't build a reservoir, you can only service 248. If you build a reservoir, the existing wells could service 436.
Okay, and that's basically the current draw that we have from our system. And sorry, the last one, I appreciate your patience. The last one would be that second redundant well on Miller. Can that ever be used to draw water at this point, or like have both wells running at the same time?
No, it's not possible to run both wells at the same time. They draw from the same source, and the source has limitations. So the capacity of each well is more or less the same, but you can really only operate one at a time.
No, okay, thank you. Makes sense. They're pretty close together and they're big pipes. Actually, I have another one that I scribbled that I got from one of the other counselors, if I may, Madam Mayor. So I remember from former MPP Randy Pettipies, he put out a news release back when we got the money, and it said 1.4 million for Shakespeare drinking water upgrades. I'm just trying to piece together the disconnect between the numbers that we're seeing in these reports and that 1.4 million. Is that just not a sure thing, or is that just the newspaper saying a number?
Well, I think both are right. The number that was put out in the news release included what would be the municipality's contribution.
Okay.
So the government implied that they were giving you more money than they really were. So that's the total, that was the total amount of the application. So there's that point. The other point is that, and staff may be able to correct me here, but I'm not sure that grant amount is secured yet. It's still it's still up to Perth East to accept that money, and you can't accept it until you define what you want to use it for. So it's tentative grant money, my understanding.
No, thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you for the presentation.
Okay, anyone else with questions? Darryl?
No, just more of a comment again. Two components here. I'll strike it home. I'll be blunt, but not ignorant.
We're going to have the report, Darryl. So
Yeah.
right now, we're just asking questions of Mr. Burns.
Okay.
If you
Okay.
have a question, then
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. Yeah. Respectfully. Yep. Okay. A concern I
Anyone
have.
else?
Yeah. A concern I have, and this will be to Mr. Burns and staff as well, is the confusion that has developed here tonight on the three-phase power. It's looking like we're going to have to bring it from 107, which is like old 59, runs north and south. And I just got thinking that sitting here. So it looks like we're going to have to be running three-phase, regardless if we just zip it up Miller there, just trench it in quick, or cut across right in front of the church and a bunch of buildings there. So that is something I think we're going to have to look at. It looks like it's going to be a draw there with the three-phase power. I could be wrong on where the three-phase power is located, but it seems to be gray here. Nobody really knows for sure. So that's important that we get that cleared up, because it looks like it's going to have the same effect on cost, regardless of where we go, from what I can absorb. I could be wrong. That being said, I'll wait to the end till we do some more. No, thanks for that, Mayor Agate. We'll keep it minimal.
Anyone else with questions of Mr. Burns' presentation? If not, we do have a motion that Council of the Township of Perth East receive the presentation of Steve Burns, Senior Engineer, Environment from BM Ross Associates, Shakespeare Water System Class Environment Assessment for information. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Jerry. Second by Darryl. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, Mr. Burns is going to stick around until we get to that report. But before we do that, we have three other delegations. And our next delegation is Ken Petrie, and he has concerns with the expansion of the water system. Mr. Petrie, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hi there, everybody. I'm going to keep it short. I would like the council to focus on safe water at the current site for all existing customers. The meeting on October 21st, 2021. Mayor Agate stated that all residents would be forced to hook up to municipal water. Not at first, but eventually everybody would be a customer. And from that, I go to every well owner that I know and people that are on those wells do not want municipal water. We don't want it in 5 years. We don't want it in 20 years. We don't want it in 30 years. People should not be forced to hook up to a municipal water supply. Why would we want to pay for water when the water we have, we are all happy with? We should not be forced to buy something when that something is of less quality than what we currently own. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Petrie? Not, Council of Township of Perth East received a presentation from Ken Petrie, Shakespeare resident, regarding concerns about the expansion of Shakespeare municipal water for information. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Amanda. Second by Carol. All those in favor? Carried.
If I may just pump in there. Mr. Petrie, you're unmuted yet, just in case it gets ringing back and forth. If you just press mute, it'll help us. Sorry.
Thanks, Carol. Our next presenter is Mr. Cavalier. Mr. Cavalier, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak today here as a delegation. My name is James Cavalier, and I live at 3986 Byron Street, Shakespeare. I'm here today on council to speak on behalf of the Village of Shakespeare, the water and boundary petition. In regards to the Shakespeare EA for the municipal water expansion, we've been following closely, and by watching many documents and correspondence, our understanding is clear. It clearly shows that the private wells is part of this, and as well as the expansion of the village. This is something the council has not been transparent about. It is quite concerning. We understand there's been concern from members of the community as well as members of council about the transparency of the council, and is shown on video at the Perth East Council meeting on November 2nd, 2021 at approximately 33 minutes and 19 seconds and 43 minutes to 50 seconds. This is a major concern and is the reason for the petition started by myself on behalf of the concerned citizens and businesses, as well as the surrounding area of Shakespeare. And it will affect in the towns and villages that will be expanded, such as Sebringville, Millbank, Rostock, and others within Perth East, as well as all of Perth County now in the future. We have no need or want to connect to your water now or ever. We understand, as seen on the video on October 19th, 1921 council meeting, at 1 hour and 15 minutes and 31 seconds from the start, that the closure of private wells is and will be an enormous seizure of private investment. Take into consideration that the private wells cost $18,872.22, including HST, and I have a copy of such an estimate from a local company that deals mostly in installing wells. This would include a drilling of a well, a pump, and a pressure system, and was quoted on June 2nd, 2021. I'm able to provide a copy to council if needed. Please understand that the costs will be more now due to the enormous rate of inflation we have all been faced with. This seizure or closure of private investments would be estimated in the millions of dollars. These investments, like other investments, have grown in significant value and have added to the value of properties in which they are registered. Our understanding is that if maintained, a well as such can last over 100 years. It is our understanding that part of the EA is to improve the fire safety by installing fire hydrants, and would require a water tower or lift pumps to be built or installed at a very expensive cost. And by this, we mean both monetary and aesthetic to the people and the businesses of the village. It is our understanding that being a rural community, that there are better means at a much less and inexpensive cost that would serve the community and surrounding area much better. As we understand that most of the fire calls for Southeast Toll Fire Department are outside the village. Perhaps the fire chief could confirm this. We are asking council to consider holding a public meeting in the village of Shakespeare at the Shakespeare Optimus Hall at the council's time of choosing before voting and deciding which way to proceed on this matter, and to solely focus on the treatment of the municipal well arsenic at this time. Our understanding is the rest of the province of Ontario has opened to the public, and is our understanding there is no reason for a video meeting as seen here today. It is our understanding that the arsenic treatment is quite a simple and very inexpensive thing to treat at both private and municipal levels. Understanding this, we are asking, why has the Council and Public Works Office, the Perth East, not already fixed the arsenic issue? Our understanding is that the Ontario standard for arsenic levels was changed on January 1st, 2018, and is a health and safety concern for safe drinking water, as outlined in the EA. This has been over 4 years and 8 months since the Ontario safety for arsenic levels has changed. The municipality leaves great concern for those already connected to the municipal system. The information gained is arsenic can be treated at a cost of approximately $750 per unit for a reverse osmosis system. This would be far less than the proposed upgrade. Although there are other ways that the system can be rendered. Again, I can provide documentation if needed. It is our understanding that shortly after the time of the Ontario standard arsenic levels change on January 1st, 2018, and just shortly after the BM Ross screening final report on April 7th, 2021, that a local developer had applied on April 14, 2021, for an expansion to the village boundary that would expand the village north to the village to the creek. This can be found on the Perth East website, and I will provide how to navigate this on the People of Shakespeare Facebook group for both the council and the public to look at. It can be found on Perth East's agenda for May 4th, 2021, and is item number 9.1, pages 161 to 184. This was right after the BM Ross screening report final, dated April 7, 2021, which recommended on-site treatment on Miller Street with no expansion to the municipal system to be the most feasible and cost-effective option. We understand this proposed expansion by the developer would expand the village boundary just short of Shakespeare Pond, allowing for many houses. The document also shows that BM Ross consultant firm was referenced by the developer's proposal and also involved as a consultant firm for the Shakespeare EA we are here to talk about today. We understand the interest of the public for concern and all parties involved. This is just one of the projects that would expand the village boundaries, as there is one to the west boundary of Shakespeare as well. Would the council for the Perth East Planning Office please explain this? We ask the council to take into consideration the extra financial burden that this expansion of the water system and village boundaries will place on everyone in a time of high inflation and rising costs. And this would only cause financial struggles for both young families, people on fixed incomes, and older residents. We ask that each member council should consider that indebting citizens, businesses, and the community is not in the best interest of the whole community, not now or in the future, as stated in the AA. And to consider as well the rising cost of living, the larger volume of traffic, greater amounts of pollution, and the higher crime rate that are all associated with expanding a community. Our understanding is that there will be so many citizens and businesses within the village and surrounding area that will struggle from this for the personal gain of a few. Please take into consideration, please also understand all other small communities within Percy, as well as the communities of all Perth County are watching. This decision of council here today will reflect on them in the future. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Cavalier? If not, Andrew?
Sorry. The delegation's asking for a public meeting. So can we let the delegation know when that'll be discussed by council? Is that a new business, or will that be right after all the delegations are done?
We are getting to the report, and when we get to the report, that can be discussed then.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hugh? You're muted, Hugh.
I don't know if you guys can see Hugh twice as well, but I've got Hugh on here twice. I think you got your phone on there too, Hugh.
Oh, I can see him twice now too. Anyway, can you unmute yourself on one of the spots and talk? No? Okay, anyone else with questions? If not, then we have a motion. The Council of the Township of Perth East receive the presentation from Jamie Cavalier, Shakespeare resident, Village of Shakespeare Water and Boundary Expansion petition for information.
Sorry, Mayor Agate, Councilor Hurlick had his hand up for a question there.
Yeah, if I just make note, thanks, Mr. Cavalier. It's quite interesting. Involved weekend. Wow, what a presentation. Thanks for coming forward. There is great concern. The rural as well has great concern at this point. The explosion potential that may happen depending on what kind of system is chose. Shakespeare has a lot of concerns here, and I'm just thanking the engagement of the community for being transparent yourselves and coming forward instead of just rumbling and bumbling. So thank you for popping out and taking that time, Mr. Cavalier. You're a community loved being at this point.
You have a question, Daryl? I'm asking questions, please. Okay, we do have a motion for information. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Hugh is flipping around on my screen. It's making me dizzy. Moved by Amanda, second by Jerry. All in favor? Carried. And thank you again for your presentation. And now we ask Mr. Dan Reese. The floor is yours.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm a neighbor of Mr. Cavalier, and as far as the expansion for the water, I'd like to ask council for clarification on what their perceivement of at time of connection would be for the people that would be added to the system. Would that be, well, if we were to go with a system that would have the reservoir to include it all, would basically be big enough to include the entire town? Would time of connection be when the system's put in, or would time of connection be when the person actually connects to the system at the water line? Because the most important principles, number 9, cost related to growth, says it can be applied to the existing customers and future properties that can be serviced. Well, if that includes every resident in Shakespeare, then that would mean that well owners who aren't taking water from the system would be paying for it as well. I'm not opposed to expansion as some of the other people are. I build houses for a living, so my angle on that is different than most. But I think the biggest thing too is if it's supposed to be water quality for the existing people, that I'm not understanding why the existing site isn't being looked at more closely. There's no, the proposed plan shows a building that's 25 feet tall, but that could, reservoir, the holding tank, all of that stuff could easily be put underground with the same footprint, create a reservoir underground as opposed to a holding tank within the building, and decrease the height of that building. And as Councillor McAlpin pointed out, that the single phase could be converted into 3-phase to create the more power that could possibly be needed as well. I wish I would have had time to get more of a formal presentation like Mr. Cavalier did, but time got away from me, so I wasn't able to do that. But thanks for your time.
Okay, do we have any questions of Mr. Reese? Andrew?
Thank you, Mary. I guess, Mr. Reese, so just so all council and maybe even staff know your background. So I know the answer, but I'm just going to ask it so everybody else knows. Are you a handyman, or do you build a house from the clay up to the shingles? What's your experience
I'm
like?
Custom residential builder, houses, renovations.
For how many years, Mr. Reese?
I've got in total probably about 30 years experience since I started as a kid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing no questions, we do have a motion. The Council of the Township of Perth East received the presentation from Dan Reese, Shakespeare resident, intentions of the Shakespeare water study for information. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Jeremy. Second by Andrew. All in favor? Carried. And maybe just to all three presenters, if you could send us a copy of your presentation, if you have a copy. I know Mr. Cavalier was reading off of something that would help. And I don't know if Mr. Reese, if you do it, and Mr. Petrie, but if you could send that in and then council can see it as well. Okay. All right, thanks, gentlemen. And so now we're going to move to the report on the Shakespeare Water Environment Assessment. So being it's under the CAO, I think Wes and Jake and Mike are going to present. Question, Andrew?
More of a request. We have a 5-minute comfort break, Mayor Eggets?
Sure.
It's a long meeting, maybe longer.
2 minutes.
Great.
Well, that's why I wanted a special meeting for this, but that didn't seem to go over. So yes, you can have a couple minutes and then we're going to go back at it.
Yeah, that was my question as well. Myself, I've been here since 6 o'clock. So yeah, it's been busy.
Okay, I think we're going to get back at it. We still got quite a few things on our agenda yet to look at tonight, so we're going to move on. And the next item up is the 8.2.1, the Shakespeare Water Environmental Assessment. And we have Mike, Wes, and Jake. So I'm not sure which one of you three want to start, but
Yeah, through you, Maragates, I think I'll start, and I know Jake and Wes will fill in any gaps that I may leave. And certainly the report is part of the agenda, and some of it you guys have heard as it relates to the presentation that came from Steve and BM Ross. First, I think I want to acknowledge from a staff perspective, we recognize that this is a very difficult decision, and that there are many moving parts as it relates to this decision. So we're conscious of that. Part of our role is not to overstep, but to try and provide as much information as we possibly can to help with the decision making. And we know that that doesn't always make it easier, but that was the intent of both the presentation and the report. A couple of quick things I want to try to address and to clarify. At no point did staff or BM Ross make assumptions that council would be looking to force current private well owners to connect to the system. The numbers that are presented, the 248 to the 436, there is no correlation between that and the fact that there are 240 private wells. That was not part of the thinking. We were trying to create capacity to allow for us to force connections of 240 existing private wells. That was not part of the discussion and has not been part of the discussion in my time here. So I want to make that clear for everyone. The idea is, and the report tries to touch on that, the concept is that allowing for growth to 438 would allow for new growth within Shakespeare, not only within the existing service territory, but in the potential future. Again, we're talking 20, 30, 50 years in the future, the urban boundaries may change or may need to change. And allowing for some of that capacity within what we're proposing to do as a project, we wanted to present that as an option for council. It's not about forcing 250 people to connect to the system. So at that point, I wanted to make clear, or try to make as clear as possible. The costing piece, we gave Steve a lot of credits for delving into that. There are a lot of unknowns around the costing, and council, I think, has acknowledged that with their questions. The one thing I would say that maybe hasn't been captured yet, when we talk about growth capacity, that's when the opportunity for us to collect some of those costs through development charges exists. So when we grow from the 160 that are currently connected to 248 or to 436, some of those costs are related to growth and are eligible for development charges. So it's not like there are a number of funding opportunities that exist for us to consider, but we're not at that stage yet because we need to make the decision about where we're going with the project itself. There were some great questions as it relates to the electrical power. And again, we acknowledge we don't have all the answers. And if there are more questions, we'll do more digging. That's what we're here to do. And that's what we're trying to present to council, as much information as we possibly can. So yeah, the idea and the concepts that have been presented, staff has been well engaged in all of those things with BM Ross. They've presented information to us. We tried to make sure that we looked at all of the avenues, but maybe there are other avenues that do exist, but we think the options that are presented are viable options that council should give serious consideration to. The fire suppression, or the increased fire suppression, we think is just a factor also that council should consider. We're not suggesting one has more power over the decision than others, but they are all factors that we want you guys to have the opportunity to consider as part of the process. So that's the content of the report is there. I'm certain that if you have questions that either Wes, myself, or Jake can try and answer. The one thing I do want to clarify around kind of the timing and the funding piece, yeah, it does have a pretty broad time range. We have not formalized an agreement with the federal or provincial governments as it relates to the agreement. I don't anticipate that timeline will change, but I do anticipate that we will start to get extreme pressure from them to say, where are you guys going with this project? They've been very patient while we went through this process, and we've said to them, listen, we're gathering information. We want to make sure our council makes the best informed decision they possibly can. Give us some time, and they've done that to this point. That may change, and there may be more pressure as it relates to moving ahead with the project. The other date that I think council needs to also consider is that MECP, the Ministry of the Environment, has basically granted us regulatory relief until September 30th of 2023. Depending upon the project, any of these projects, we are going to be pushing it already to get anything completed in advance of that date. If we drag this decision out, September 2023 is not very far away, and this is a fairly significant capital project. So those are a couple of comments that I wanted to make as it relates to it. And again, going back to this, we acknowledge this is a difficult decision. It's a busy time. There's an election. We know all of these things from a staff perspective. We acknowledge it. We sympathize, but we need to move forward with the project. And that's why we've moved forward with a recommendation and the reports that are presented tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone with questions? Errol?
This will be towards, I'm going to say Public Works and Mr. Ross there, or Mr. Burns with BM Ross. So the existing setup is the 160, potential to 249. And I heard the comments and what I read, we feel 248 or whatever it was, 248, 250. How sure are we at that? I mean, at the end of the day, that's another 90 homes that we can handle there, which is quite a few homes. That would allow for some growth if there was a slight extension of a boundary. It's definitely not a potential 400 more homes again. So what is the methodology exactly that you come up with that 250-ish? I know you talked about max flows. I just look at it at my end. I know what a 4,000, 6,000 head finishing barn, what it takes to feed those hogs. So I'm just, I just want to know exactly how sure are you within 10 houses, or would there even be potential another 30 houses on that 248-ish? Can you help me out there, Mr. Burns?
The number is an estimate. It's based on a number of things. It's based on what we believe current peak use is per customer. We have fairly accurate information on how much is used per customer on an average basis, how much is used on a maximum daily basis. We don't have any information on the peak instantaneous flow, but we have lots of formulas, rules of thumb, and so on that allow us to judge that. So we've estimated the peak flow and divided it by 160 customers to come up with a peak flow per customer. And then we took the capacity of the wells, which has been defined through study and tests and so on, and divided that well capacity by the peak flow, estimated peak flow per customer. And that's where the 248 comes from. So it's based on some assumptions, and it could be plus or minus 20, but it is just as likely to be minus 20 as it is plus 20. It's the best we can do with the information available.
Okay, great, thanks. Second part, if you don't mind, it's quick, Mayor. Maybe Wes can help me here. So if there was to be purchase of the property in behind, we would be able to bring construction equipment right through off of the street to the north of Miller, correct? I got that correct. We would be able to access that site from the cul-de-sac area and drive right in.
That is correct. It is not, it doesn't line up perfectly. It would be offset a little bit, but when we drilled the new well, we actually used that property to access the existing footprint there.
Okay, great. No, thanks. And last part is just more of a comment. We'll have to check here. It's thrown a wrench in it. There was great concern of hydro is where that 3-phase runs. And it's looking like potentially we may have to run 3-phase from either site. So that, you know, the single phase idea, it looks like we're probably going to have to run it either way if it is out at 107, if it's not on 7 and 8. So there's really no gain there unless we just go with the single phase at either site. But no, thanks. That's all I got for right now. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with questions? Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess for the CAO's report, I just liked his opening statement. I appreciate the fact that they know that this is a big deal, and staff knows this is a big deal, and the fact that they're doing what they can to help us understand what everything is great. We're looking at when you start talking about growth, it's a bigger conversation. I think that's where everybody's a little, certainly increasing the water capacity will increase the opportunity for growth. And I see we have most of our planning staff here today. It's nice to see them. So yeah, there was I think we might be able to answer this question, and hopefully staff, it's kind of part of the report. How we got to where we are now, from that date that's been mentioned many times, April 7th, where it was a preferred option, to July 13th, when we started down the road of the discussion on expansion. I know there was referred to in one of the delegations, I believe, was a letter from a local developer asking for when the appropriate settlement boundary time was to apply for expansion. That left us, we referred it to county, I believe. So I'm wondering, was that a factor in trying to improve, as everybody's calling it, an opportunity for expansion? Like, I'm just trying to fill in that time from the preferred option in the first EA to when we started down a different road. And I know there's costs involved, and it's great to have that conversation. You want to spend the money wisely. It just seems like that's the only thing that that I've been aware of that's different in that time frame. So if you get some help with that, that'd be awesome.
Go ahead, Jake.
Thanks, Mayor Agates. Andrew, I think the biggest thing was we did receive proposals for various technologies. And at that point, we were quite surprised at some of the figures we were getting. That kind of was the reason for that, being obviously the site constraints. And that was kind of the thing that pushed us to, maybe we need to explore some alternative options here. And that's where the ball kind of started getting rolling. So hopefully that kind of answers it. It really come down to, we were very surprised at the cost for putting it in our site as it was.
Andrew?
Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, like with, I was saying before, with 300 acres of farmland getting gobbled up every day in Ontario, we want to make sure that anything that everybody's included in any notion of any type of expansion. And again, we have seemed to attract a lot of interest on that topic during this meeting too. So I'm wondering, we briefly spoke, CEO Givens, about hope everybody can hear me okay, about the capital surcharges and water charges that are being used now. I'd actually reached out to staff and asked for the policy. There was different things that the previous treasurer would put, and I couldn't find them. I think they might have been in a PowerPoint, which describes how that money could be used. And I apologize, I did search for them, but I couldn't find them. I was going to send them back. So it's an absolute, it's not part of our policy to backfill potential $3,000 charge to whatever benefiting customers. Just to understand that better so we don't spend too much time on it.
So it's through you, Mary, I guess. So Councillor McAlpine, yeah, there is discretion around the utilization of the reserve dollars. And again, it's a council discretion. I think, and this isn't a failing of council, it's a failing of staff, that we have new staff that have morphed into existing policies, and we're doing the best we can to try to acknowledge, and policies are great, but there's always an interpretation associated with a policy. So I think I would make this statement. We aren't at the point where we're comfortable giving an answer in terms of how we would fund the project. What BM Ross did was looked at it and assigned costs as it relates to the properties that exist. I think there is potential around conversations, depending upon which direction we go, that, yeah, there's potential to borrow funds from reserves. There's potential to borrow funds from future development charges. There are a number of options that we will be able to consider, but it depends if there is the growth potential, if DCs become part of it. If there isn't, then they're not part of the conversation. You know, I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah, but I don't want to be absolute in saying that council will not have flexibility as it relates to the existing water reserves. In particular, in my mind, there would be some discretion.
No, I look at the Mill Street funding project in the Milverton, and it looks like there's maybe a grant that was, and it's paid for out of reserves but I don't know the details. So I'm just kind of throwing it out there because obviously we're going to have to do something, right? So however it ends up tonight, we have to fix the arsenic. Yeah, so the other question was the total funding we saw in the other slide, the 14 million, so, or 1.4 million, that's been kind of answered. That was, yeah. Now, is there any consideration to maybe improve the system, like there's some desire to put in some type of implementing bylaw or possibility? And I know this is, I'm just saying this now, that it could be township wide. I don't know what the desire of the council of the day would be to kind of alleviate any concerns that there would be no, no forced well connection basically, or incurred costs. I know this was talked about along the way. Is that something that's possible that we could put that in our policy going forward to make everybody feel better, or is that out of line?
It's a fair question, I think, Councillor McAlpine, based on what's gotten us to this point. Here's what I would suggest, and what I've said to other councils. You guys are being bound to make this decision, and I understand it's a difficult decision. Making decisions that impact future councillors 10 and 15, 20 down the years is not something that I would recommend. But that's, you can make that decision on your own. And typically, passing a policy that suggests, yeah, there will be no forced connections for private wells is certainly something that we can document and put out there. But 10 years from now, a council may come along and say, that wasn't a very good decision. We're scrapping that policy. And that's the reality that exists with the governance model that we have. And you guys know that, but I understand the question.
Yeah, it would kind of take the air out of a lot of the conversation. So it looks like it's, so we keep talking about future opportunities, and I'm not sure, to me, and maybe to a lot of people, maybe some on council, the future opportunities looks like growth, right? So included in growth would be the connection of more people to have this, I'm going to say a little bit imaginary, of more users, less rates, because I think if you look around many areas, the rates are very high. Compared to ours, we're doing a great job of keeping our rates down. So yeah, I'm just wondering, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense in that one. So the future, the opportunity word is being used a lot. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to say. It's opportunity for spending money wisely, but the word benefit is kind of directly out of the Drainage Act, and benefit it means benefit, but it also means cost allocated too, right? It's a little confusing, but I think you know what I mean.
So, and I just want to offer one comment around that. And I think council's pretty familiar with Shakespeare and the layout and the urban boundaries. There's a significant chunk of land west of Sackville Street that is already designated for future development. And the manager of planning for the county is on board here, and she might be able to help me with that. But even to service that with water, that parcel of land would basically end all future development if we end at 248. That's kind of the number. So that would be the extent of any development on the system if we expanded it to 240 or left it at 248, I guess I would say. I don't think there would be any opportunity beyond that from a servicing standpoint. It also would probably have a significant impact if private well owners, for whatever reason, Councillor McAlpine, it may never happen. And I'm happy to suggest that it may never happen. Some capacity to allow private well owners who may have a reason to want to be on municipal water services. I don't know what those reasons may or may not be in the future. We wouldn't have that capacity. There are some large lots that exist in Shakespeare that have the potential for infilling. We would lose those opportunities as well from a water system standpoint. So that's, and I understand your comment, and I understand the concerns that are expressed by some around growth. I think there are others, and Mr. Reese was on here as well, who suggested that maybe growth isn't the worst thing for Shakespeare or for other communities. And there is potential, but again, I don't want to overstep. That's a decision that council is going to need to make. There will be significant conversation happening as we review the official plan with the County of Perth about expanding urban areas and where it makes sense and why it makes sense. And servicing is part of that conversation. And I give Sally, the manager of planning at Perth County, a lot of credit because she thinks about servicing, and that's not always something that gets considered when you're looking at urban boundaries. So I hope that somewhat answered the question.
No, it confirms that servicing is, I appreciate your comments, CO Gibbons, that servicing and ability to serve more definitely impacts how the official plan unfolds in supplementary boundary expansion. So size for 436. I'm wondering about the 1 to 2A and there's the commercial loss. Now, I'm wondering how many loss of a commercially zoned property. Is that a big deal in Shakespeare or not? I know that we don't utilize it all along the highway anyway, but there's a residential on one side, or it's being used as residential. And then I'm just wondering if, there's a lot of merits to the 2A proposal, but I'm just wondering if that's been considered, the limited availability of roadside commercial.
From my perspective, it really didn't get much consideration. I'll be frank, Councillor McAlpine. I didn't see it as a significant factor as it relates to the site itself.
Okay.
Does anyone else have questions while Andrew's looking for his next one? Sally, you want to make a comment?
Sure, thank you, Mayor. And through you to council. I just wanted to offer that. Are you able to hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my connection seems a bit rocky just as of the last 20 minutes or so. However, I just wanted to offer for additional fodder to this conversation that we do look at servicing and expansion of boundaries in concert, because it's important that they are planned together or at least with each other in mind. And we haven't been looking seriously at the expansion. Shouldn't say seriously, we've been looking at
what potential properties in Shakespeare would be good for growth if growth was necessary. And we look at things like land use constraints, MDS, for example, floodplains, natural environment areas, those kinds of things. And then we also work with the engineers to look at, okay, what areas are difficult to service or what areas are more easily serviced. And there's properties around the boundary of Shakespeare that are good candidates for expanding the boundary, but we don't yet know if expanding the boundary is necessary or going to be proposed in the new OP. Council asked for an update to our comprehensive review that would give us a better analysis of land needs. And we do have deficits around the county with respect to residential lands and in some cases employment lands as well. And we're trying to figure out the best places to put them. And Shakespeare wasn't really on the radar 2 years ago when we were doing some of that work because of the water quality issues for one, but also there is some existing land in Shakespeare for development. So it will really come down to whether or not there's a need to expand right now. Municipalities are required to have a 25-year land supply. And because the official plan is so out of date and hasn't been had land added to it for so long, there is deficits and we're going to have to add somewhere. And so Shakespeare being a serviced area or partially serviced area it just has to be part of the conversation, but we haven't made proposals yet. And we do get requests from individual landowners and they're taken into account when they coincide with the work that we've done already on land use constraints and servicing constraints. So the Township of Perth East and the county may have received those, but we haven't landed on proposed boundaries. And we do try to plan those in concert with servicing, because whether the servicing is there today or needs to be put in when development comes, municipalities have to plan for that. When you invest in servicing, it's like a 75-year thing that you're purchasing. And so you want to know when you make those decisions where the future growth is being directed to, or vice versa. Are we going to put, in here in Perth County right now, we're looking at, where could servicing go? Not where is it necessarily, because it's not there in every serviced area for growth. So I just wanted to offer some of those parameters for people to consider too, that it's important to look at servicing when we look at growth areas, and they are connected, but one doesn't necessarily make the other happen right away, and vice versa.
Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, I don't have any comments, Mary. No questions. I'm just gonna have some comments, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll get my 2 cents in. So Sally touched on a bit about the growth aspect. Of course, if you look at the Milverton, who would have thought when we even approved those subdivisions back there 4 years ago, like 5, 10, 15 years ago, that the growth that was going to happen, we don't know. But to be prepared for it is, in my mind, essential. It's one of the things that we need to do. And Mr. Burns, your presentation really helped. Oh my God, immensely. So I know we're not making decisions on who pays for what right now. I think we need to decide on the alternative location. My vote would be, we're not voting yet, but would be site 2. And 2B is the most, as you can see, Mr. Burns said, the cheapest for everyone, but it's the most, in my mind. The B, it doesn't add that fire content that I personally would like to see for all residents, but at least site 2B does give the option or the future to expand. And again, for that growth portion that's there, And again, we did, I think Mr. Burns touched on it. If we waited in 5-10 years to do this again, the costs are going to be at least double as what we see here now. So that's just some of my comments. I know it's the Shakespeare, the East Hopes, but it affects the entire township. Everything that we do affects the entire township. So that's my thoughts on my personal thought on the site and the option.
Okay, Daryl?
No, just a general comment. And is Sally here yet? I believe there's so many faces. I believe she's here. Yes. Anyways, look, so I'm a rural farm boy my whole life. I have grown up with the rumblings of a highway, expressway. We don't know what it is, kind of shelved, back up, down. It's kind of shelved right now, but not really. And in the rural, Southeast Hope and Northeast Hope, we're fully aware that if there's a big explosion of development in Shakespeare, the thought is pretty strong that the road isn't going to be able to handle those 200 extra vehicles potentially a day out on that road in shots, or 100 at a time. And that will be just enough to potentially trigger the highway to go through with no return. This has been an issue for quite some time. It hasn't gone anywhere. The Perth Federation is fully aware of this as well. Talked with them last night. They would have liked to have seen some information on this, what we're talking about here tonight, but they have concerns as well, rightfully. The farming community does now as well. There was comments there from our delegations this evening that we should maybe have a bit of a public meeting on this, actual in person, just for people to come in, ask some questions. At this point, I'm definitely not prepared to go forward with any of the alternative sites. I'd support the one that we have there now. That would allow, a potential 80, 90 homes. That's quite a few in my mind. What I'm getting at is, I don't think Shakespeare can handle 2, 4. We can just keep adding banks, let's be honest, potentially. And we'll turn Shakespeare into Baden. That's what'll happen. And that high will get pounded through. Heaviest livestock populated area, it's Cow Alley, they call it. And there's thousands of trips back and forth all year of machinery, and we're all affected in our properties. So for me, I'm not prepared to do too much tonight until we have a little more public input, or unless we go with the original site. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew?
Thank you, Mary. Sorry, I see planning manager McMullen's still here. I'm just wondering, the time to do boundary expansion is that OP review. Is that correct? Maybe one of the county people know that. Like, there is a time, you can't just expand the boundaries whenever you want. So I think that
That's correct.
The feeling is that the correlation of service increase, even if it's only on paper, and the county plan for expansion happening at the same time in this time frame that seems to be a bit rushed. I know we're in the middle of a contest. It's got me concerned. And I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong. I'm just saying the timing is once in a 4-year thing. It's very interesting timing. So the time for OP review is now, and that's the only time when you can increase settlement boundaries. So just having said that, if we put on paper, we're going to add another 200 houses, capacity for 200 houses in the village of Shakespeare, I'm going to guess that somebody's going to request that be added to Shakespeare. So that's where I'm at. I'm kind of with Councillor Hurlick. I was clicking back between 2A and 1. So I'm thinking that we just don't have enough information. If we have to move ahead, the safe bet is the bet.
Sally, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep. Do you want to answer to that, please?
Sure. I can offer some clarification around when you can expand a boundary. Okay. And that is it's not necessarily at the time of an OP review, but that's often when they happen. Because what the trigger is a comprehensive review. And that's what the county commissioned in 2020 that said that we were deficient in lands for residential growth and employment growth. And that is mainly because, not just because we're experiencing growth now, probably in higher numbers than we have in the past, but also because we haven't added land for over 15 years, other than through special policies. And that is, those additions have been not necessarily planned with like holistically the whole community in mind or the whole county in mind. They've been added through official plan amendments by individual developers. So since we're doing our new OP now, we are trying to catch up. And the comprehensive review that we have already says that we have some deficits in the land that we need to designate for future growth. And that's growth that's anticipated between now and 2051. So over the next 25 years. And we're actually updating those numbers as we speak. And we'll be getting some new projections in a few weeks' time. And then
Oh, we lost you. Are you there? We lost Sally in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think the comments were in terms of the new projections that would be coming out, that would be part of the official plan discussion. I do want to just maybe add to that as it relates to expansion of the boundaries. We received an application
growth
last week.
projection. Pardon?
Now we can hear you, Sally.
Yep, keep going.
It's the growth projections and then the land needs assessment. It's some mathematics that get done. And we have a 2020 report that says we need to add land, and we're about to get that updated that says we're probably going to need to add a little more than we thought we were in 2020. And we have also direction from the province that we must add land to serviced areas, not to unserviced areas. So that narrows the playing field down to Mitchell, Listowel, Milverton, Atwood, and Shakespeare. So like I said a little bit earlier, the exercise that we go through is looking at the lands on the periphery of those serviced areas and trying to pick the places that have the least amount of constraints and have the greatest possibility for future services to be installed, because those are important decisions for municipalities to make and incredible investments. So we're trying to give some insight for municipalities about where they could grow and where they may want to invest.
Okay. Anyone else with questions? Daryl?
No, and it's, thanks, Sally. Great help here tonight. It's a lot to digest. I'll make that clear again. And just a general comment again, the rural residents of North and Southeast Hope have great concern at this point. They've been brought up to speed and they're watching and they have concerns. They're very concerned about what's going to shake down in Shakespeare and the size and potential expansions of highways. It's a great concern. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with questions? So what does council wish to do?
I'll move item number 1.
Jerry has his hand up.
I believe verbal, if Robert's rules goes ahead of that. I move verbally.
Well, I'm the one who picks who puts their hand up, and Jerry had his hand up. So I want to hear from Jerry first.
So the
hand. Jerry?
Yeah, so a couple of comments about more public information upon another public meeting. I understood this was the public meeting where to determine an alternate site or existing site or an alternate site tonight to get this thing going. It's something that we need to get the ball rolling on. I think site number 2, again, B is my personal preferred, so I'm if we just do the same site, sure, we're going to treat the arsenic. Obviously, that's what we want to do. We want to get that looked after for sure. But now's the opportunity. We've done all this work. Let's make this thing work with site number 2, whether it's B. I guess we could do A, but I think site 2 for sure.
I'm going to challenge the ruling of the chair. I read it in Robert's rules just last night. A verbal is electronic meetings or not. So I'm moving location number 1.
Come again? Sorry.
I reluctantly challenged the chair on who gets first call at a motion. So I'm challenging that ruling. I believe a verbal motion trumps everything. So in the words "I move," start the proceeding. So that's what I'm doing. I'm moving item number 1, location number 1 at the existing site.
What I did, Andrew, was I called the person whose hand I saw go up, and that was Jerry. And so if you wish to speak in my council chambers, you put your hand up. You do not just come on and speak. So Jerry spoke. I don't believe Jerry moved a motion. He just gave his opinion. So if you want to give a motion now, you're welcome to do that. And your hand is up. It's your turn, Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move option number 1.
Okay. So the motion I have is that the Council of the Township of Perth East received a report entitled Shakespeare Water Environmental Assessment dated October 4th, 2022, prepared by the Chief Administrative Officer, the Manager of Public Works and Parks, and the Operations Coordinator for Information. And that Council approve option 1 as a preferred alternative and direct staff to proceed with design and completion of a municipal class EA. And so that's moved by Andrew. We have a seconder. Errol. Is there any more comments or questions? So I'll let the mover go last. I'll let the seconder go second last, and I'll start with Jerry.
Thank you. So just to confirm, if option 1 is picked, the total allocation per customer is $3,450. Just want to confirm that. To connect existing customers. Develop properties 0. Future connections are $3,450. Again, we're not, I know we're not going into the costs, but this is here for us. If option 1 is picked, that's what's presented. My point is, okay, so option 1 is $3,450. If we were to choose option 2B, the cost per connection per customer is $3,000. It's $450 less per customer. I just want to confirm that.
Mr. Burns, can you, or Mike, which Mr. Givens, who wants to confirm?
I'll let Steve speak to it first. Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that is correct. Option 1, the charge to the existing customers will be $3,450 based on the assumptions we laid out here. And for option 2B, it would be $3,000.
Okay, Jerry, you're good. Okay, so Daryl, I'll let you speak now.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks. Again, a lot to digest here tonight. Again, the farming community has concerns. So for me, it's option 1, or it gets shelved and we have more public engagement. At the end of the day, it's an extra, 60-ish homes, 40, and no, more than that, closer to about 90 homes that we can handle here. That's quite a few. That'll allow some expansion for sure. And again, at the end of the day, I take my responsibilities and duties serious. I reflect on them at the beginning of the meeting. I pray. That's what I do. I pray when to speak, when to keep my mouth shut, and to be fair. that's how I handle this. We have great concerns. There is literally millions and millions upon millions of dollars of farmland at potential risk here if Shakespeare explodes in size. It's clear we don't think we can handle any more traffic in gluts on that road. It's been talked about again and off and on. Listowel is having these issues now. I talked to somebody last night, 86 highway. What's going to happen there? We got to get this figured out. We can't handle this. So for me, it's option one. That'll allow 90-ish homes. That's awesome. The 21 report, April 21 report, it recommended that we fix it up. I believe there probably can be some adjustments made there through some grade control. We'll see what happens. I think we can jazz it up a little better. It's looking like we can come in off that other property. I feel confident the existing neighboring properties will work with us to allow us to fix it up. The three-phase power, that was always a big concern. It looks like there's some great confusion there. It's looking like either site, it's going to be the same amount of work potentially to get the three-phase if that's the route we go. So again, being there was a study with recommendations, it was kind of out there, but nobody knew about it. Yeah, I'm only confident tonight with option one, or it gets shelved. So that's it for me. Thank you. And that's why I'm seconding it.
Okay, so we have a couple other people that wish to comment before I let Andrew, and that's, we'll go with Amanda.
Just a question regarding, it's for staff. It's just a question regarding timelines. We've had some discussion tonight from the delegations regarding wishes to hold some further consultation. And I know that the motion on the floor is regarding moving to an option. If council, what would the timelines be like if, and again, this is sort of hypothetical, if we were to, circle back on the requests that some of the delegations made this evening about further consultation, where would that lead us in terms of some of the deadlines and constraints that we find ourselves in?
Go ahead, Mike.
So through you, Mayor Eggetts, I'll make a couple of quick comments around it. And yeah, this is a council decision as it relates to deferring and looking for maybe a public forum or something along those lines. A couple of key timelines. It's October 4th. It would probably not be able to be organized until sometime in November at the earliest. There's a potential that council would be in a lame duck position at that point and wouldn't be able to make a decision around the preferred alternative. Just throwing that into the mix just to complicate things even more if they weren't complicated enough. So we're here to support council. If the intent or for council to feel more comfortable as it relates to the preferred alternative, if a public forum where basically we provide the presentation as provided now, we could do it. It would probably push us into November, and we're probably then looking at not a decision made until December. And then that tightens that September deadline as it relates to completing the works even tighter. But all things are possible, they tell me.
Okay, Jeremy.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add to the conversation here, except that I came into the night thinking one thing, and I think I'm leaving the night still thinking that 2A is our best option. New site, keeping it down to that 248, but it does have the ability to expand if we decided to in the future without building on a whole new site. I'm a little torn between that and option one. Also a very difficult decision for us to make when we're not living in that community, and the potential for not being here in a month ourselves too. So it's I feel a little bit behind, backed into a corner making a decision like this, an important decision like this. I would like to see it put off until November or December personally. New council, big decision to come up, but it's very important. So again, I think I'm leaning to 2A personally, but that's again, I would love to see it, some more community consultation as well.
Okay, Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor Agats. So no, this is great conversation. I'm glad we finally got to the point where we need to make a decision and talk about this stuff. Deferral might be okay, unfortunately, due to the order of the agenda. And I would love that too. I would say if we could have a public meeting and just put out the drawings and everything like the presentation we saw, and people could ask calm questions about, the possibilities, that maybe the community would come around, but it doesn't look like we're being given that option, right? So I think we'll go ahead with this. So Shakespeare, and I have a few minutes to talk here, so the rest of the council may not know. So Shakespeare, after they went to R2 zoning and the sewers went in, they added approximately 100 houses. So the 88 we have here, and that took about 15 years. So by no means will keeping it on the same site, if it's possible to do, which I believe it is, the growth will be exactly the same rate what it's been. So we're still going to grow. It's still going to grow it just at a more controlled rate. And in that period of time, another OP review will come or whatever, and we can have the discussion we should be having. Is this discussion we're having now? It is about growth. This is green lighting massive growth in Shakespeare. That's all there is to it. It's especially the number 4 with the third well, that is green lighting, huge expansion in Shakespeare. So that was the intent. That we've had a couple options come between the last time we saw that now, but that's the intent. It's always there. It's always lurking. The intent is to green light a bunch of expansion in Shakespeare. It's pretty obvious to everybody who lives here. So that's fine, but we need to have all the conversations that lead up to that, the traffic, the drainage, the agricultural consultations, all that stuff needs to happen before. So green lighting that now isn't going to make any difference. So I had actually, like Councillor Matheson, come into this thinking 2A was going to be a good option. I really did. Hearing some of the comments from the engineering group and staff, and council members, the 1A is going to be the quickest way, and we have this looming timeline, is going to be the quickest. You're not running pipe all over the place. You can go with the same power supply there, just upgrade. It's literally like 15 yards to get there. I don't think we need this 3-phase power. Whatever they decide is fine. So it's the quickest way to fix the problem that we have, which is the arsenic, and clean up the rust in the water. The Stevenson site isn't going anywhere. The site down at the hall isn't going anywhere that I know of. So someone wants to put in 5 subdivisions or do an OP review and do it not properly, but so that it's very transparent and have that conversation, all those options are still there. So for expedience, the quickest construction will be at the top site, and it's going to have the same effect with the same cost. We don't know, to the Milverton councillor's comment, we don't know the costs. We know we don't know the costs. These are just estimates. I was here when the sewer stuff went in, and the costs were all over the place. The cost of connection after the fact, the initial cost, it was all over the place. It's the best guess that staff could make and the consultants could make, but it was all over the place. So we can't rely on those costs. Likely, no matter what, they're all going to be higher, because these are all 2021 estimates as said in the reports. So I think we need to get the arsenic fixed, get the rust cleaned up what we can, and get moving and get this over with. Maybe for the next council has some merits, and Councillor Massey in it is bang on. It's a big thing. Dumping that on a new council may not be something nice to do, especially when you're going to be flying into a budget. So yeah, I moved it because I think it's the only option at this point for the village. It gives the security of what the vast majority of people want, which is that constrained ability to grow. And it's not stopping any conversation after the fact about growth in the future. It's just fixing the arsenic and moving on for basically the same cost, right? Hopefully staff can work their magic and find some more resources to lower that cost. So that's where I'm at. Again, 2A is a little more construction. It does have the potential to expand, and it's not going anywhere. I know and the pipes are right at the end of the road. So we're not moving the wells down to 2A. We're just moving the treatment, right? So we're putting the treatment on 2A, or we're putting the treatment up top. It's more difficult, but I've seen amazing things in my life in the factory done that should never be done. So I'm sure our staff is awesome. They know what they're doing, and we can get that done up there and make it look aesthetically pleasing by dropping the tank in the ground or some of the other great suggestions we've heard. So that's my spiel. Thanks for listening, and let's see what happens.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and the motion is to approve option 1. All those in favor of this motion? Opposed? Motion is defeated. Okay, before we go on, we're past curfew, so we need to extend curfew. If you want to keep talking, we have enough. We have other things too. So moved by Amanda. Do we have a seconder to extend curfew? Jerry? All those in favor to extend curfew? Carried. So I'm not sure what the next, does anyone else have a suggestion what they want to do? Andrew?
I can make a motion. We have a public meeting in Shakespeare Hall to discuss the project with the public.
Okay, so moved by Andrew. We have a public meeting. Do we have a seconder for that? Daryl?
Mayor, I guess this is Mike. Just a suggestion to not use the term public meeting. Can we call it a public forum or
Okay.
something along those lines? As soon as we use the term public meeting, it creates connotations for lots of people around expectations around what that will look like. So just a suggestion.
Okay, so a public forum for Shakespeare Water. We have that moved by Andrew and second by Daryl. Does anyone wish to make any comments? Daryl?
Yes, I made the comment that option 1 for me was preferred. It allowed for expansion. It seems at this point, it allowed for some expansion, but most importantly, clean up the rust and the arsenic. There was a report back in April of 21. We didn't receive it. It was shelved. And there was recommendations. That's what this is supposed to be about, is water safety and cleanliness. Now it's about growth and potential growth. Again, I bring the concerns of the farmers. We're very concerned where this is going to go. Very concerned. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. There seems to be some push from other members. Potentially, they have more concerns that we need boundary expansion. That the guys down in the north and the south here on the east side here, we're kind of, I don't want to use the word fighting this alone, but we're not being heard. I don't feel the way we should. So I'm going to go with the public meeting, and I ask council to consider it as well. That a public forum is a necessity at this point before we go any further with this topic. The rural knew nothing until you get out and pounding. And it's, well, of course, one, we're swamped in over our heads, all farming away, and big things are cooking because this is big. So yes, I'm going to second, and that's why I'm second Andrew's motion. And I honestly pray that council respects that as well. Thank you.
Hey, Jerry?
Yeah, again, I don't, as Mr. Burns in his report, we had 32 submissions from the public. We had 15 more the second time. We've seen the delegations tonight. The public knows the project. perhaps maybe a public forum once we get past this, once we get a site selected, when it comes to our payment options. I think we got to get moving on forward with this. If we leave this to the next council for December, some of us, one of us will be here for sure, that they're going to have to be brought up to speed. So it'll carry on. So I think we got to move. I don't think more public input is necessary at this time. They've had their chance.
Hey, anyone else? I'll let you speak again, Daryl. Go ahead, and then Andrew.
Yeah, no, respectfully, I thank you for allowing me to speak. It's a hot topic, and to say that the public had their chance in the farming community. It's pretty pushy, respectfully. I'm going to put that out there. They knew nothing. They knew nothing till I spent some time getting them up to speed. So I'm not sure why there's this heavy push, but there's a push here. And there was a report with recommendations that council did not see. And I'll bring that again. And I'm not sure why that happened. Maybe it's old staff, or there's a lot of retirement. I don't know, but that's out in the public. So at this point, I believe the least we can do is a public forum. Thank you.
Hey, Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor Getz. So I'm sure it's just not purposeful, but some of the comments from other councillors. So they may not be aware that the circulation of the original EA and the fact that the second EA didn't really get going till I think it was January of this year. Most of the time, only the water users were in on the submission, and a lot of people didn't see it because our provincial reporting requirements for these type of endeavors are terrible. They need to be updated. So most of the people, all the well users, all the agricultural people, did not know that this was even in progress. The EA was only solicited, the first part was only soliciting comments that 2021 April finals ESR was only soliciting comments from water users. So the broader scope was not included. So I would rather go ahead with doing a preferred option tonight, but councils chose not to. So this is a request of one of the delegation, and a couple of council members have mentioned it. So I'm willing to compromise, as I always do, and we'll try and move this ahead, albeit slower.
Anyone else with questions? I guess the only question or the comment I have, it was advertised, and we advertised it according to our rules. So if people didn't see it, we can't stop that. So people did get the information that was sent out. Anyway, we do have a motion that we have a public forum for Shakespeare Water. Is there anyone else that has questions or comments? If not, all in favor?
Yep.
Carried. Okay. We're going to move on because we do have some public meetings and some public hearings. So I declare this virtual public meeting to be open. This virtual public meeting is being held to consider a proposed zoning bylaw amendment affecting property owned by Danny DeLawyer and Dell Acres Inc. Concession to Lot 29, Ellis Ward, 5143, line 36. This virtual meeting is an opportunity for the township to advise the public of the purpose and intent of the amendment and receive their input prior to considering adoption of an implementing bylaw. If a bylaw is adopted to implement the zoning amendment, a notice of passing will be forwarded by prepaid first-class mail to various agencies of interest and others who have requested notice. An appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal objecting to the objection of the bylaw may be filed with the clerk not later than the date stated on the notice. Any person attending this meeting who wishes to receive written notice of a bylaw passed to implement the amendment is asked to give their name and mailing address to the clerk following this meeting. No written notice except as previously noted will be given unless requested by email following the meeting. Due to COVID-19, public meeting procedures have been adjusted to adhere to provincial guidelines for holding electronic meetings. Any person who wished to be heard regarding this matter was asked to register prior to this meeting and by the deadline of Monday, October 3rd, 2022 at 12 noon with the municipal clerk. I will now call on Planner Cooney to present the planning report and recommendations. Cooney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Eggets. Good evening, council members. With your permission, I would like to share my screen first.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So yes, this is the zoning bylaw amendment application for Dan the lawyer. The location is on 5143 line 36. So the purpose really of this application is this is a consent. This is a condition of a surplus farm dwelling consent application, and a rezoning is required for both the severed lot and the retained lot. And the main objective here is for the severed lot to permit only non-farm dwelling and related accessory uses, and to also rezone the retained farm lot to prohibit any new permanent residential dwelling. So now I'll go over to the location of the site. I'm sorry, I had to do this for a better view. So the subject land is approximately 40 hectares in total. Out of that, about 1 hectare is being severed off, and the shape is irregular. It has a frontage on line 36. And it's the reason for the irregular shape is really to allow for minimal land to be severed off of these farmland. And so these proposed several lots will have the dwelling units, the residential dwelling units, and accessory buildings associated with it, and a pond. And now, as for the planning considerations, during the consent review, all those regulations have been mentioned. Also in my report, I'm providing what have been looked at in terms of the County of Perth official plan, provincial policies, the non-zoning bylaw of Perth East. And I'll just mention that as per the County of Perth official plan, the property is designated agriculture and also natural resource environment. And the zoning bylaw, as per the zoning bylaw, it's zoned agriculture and natural resource too. And you see the south part on this lot is the natural environment that has been indicated, which is very far from the site. And so it is not really having any impact. The severance will not have any impact on that site. Now, as for the rezoning, as I mentioned, I just want to go over that for the several lot, it will only permit the existing single detached dwelling, pond, and accessory buildings. And it will be changed to special zone A-1. And that's only the purpose is for that residence to be used for non-farm residential purposes. As for the retained lot, it will be changed to agricultural special zone A-5, and that site-specific zone applies to that farm parcel to prohibit any new residential dwelling from being constructed. And the reason for that is so that that lot is not subdivided into smaller lots in the future. So that's the main purpose. As for the public engagement, the agencies and the public have been circulated on this application. We only received the UTRCA letter, and they have no objection to the proposed use. And I haven't received any other communication from the public. This concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Can you put it back, please, so I can see everyone?
I did that. I don't know what. Off on my end. Okay.
Great, thank you. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in opposition of the application. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in support of the application other than the applicant or the applicant's agent. The applicant or the applicant's agent did not register to make a presentation or speak with respect to the application. Are there any questions from members of council? Seeing no questions, council will consider a resolution regarding the planning report recommendation following the conclusion of the virtual public meeting. Bylaw number 207-2022 to implement the approval of the zoning application will be considered later within the council agenda. The virtual public meeting is now concluded and will continue with the regular meeting of council. Okay, so we do have a motion, and the motion is that the council of the Township of Perth East receive the report dated October 4, 2022, prepared by the planner entitled Zoning Bylaw Amendment number D14-Z07-2022-PE, submitted by MTE OLS Doug Reum on behalf of Dan DeLawyer, affecting lands described as Lot 29, Concession 2, Ellis Ward, Township of Perth East, 5143, line 36, Stephenville, for information. And that council held a statutory public meeting pursuant to section 34 of the Planning Act with respect to zoning bylaw amendment D14-Z07-2022-PE. And that council approved zoning bylaw amendment 207-2022 submitted by MTE OLS Doug Reum on behalf of Dan DeLawyer for Lot 29, Concession 2, Ellis Ward, 5143, line 36, Stephenville, Township of Perth East. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Amanda, second by Jeremy. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, now we'll move to public hearings. And the first, council now temporarily adjourned to city of adjustment pursuant to section 45 of the Planning Act. I now declare this virtual public hearing open. This virtual public hearing is being held to consider an application affecting property currently owned by Lois McEwen and described as Plan 403, Lot 4, Milverton Ward, 69 Mill Street, East Milverton. The purpose of this hearing is to give the committee and the public an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to the proposed application and receive their input, and for the committee to make a decision on the application. All persons attending this hearing will be given an opportunity to be heard or make a presentation. Committee members may ask questions for the purpose of clarifying the application, but are asked to withhold comments on this application until all present have been given an opportunity to be heard. Due to COVID-19, public hearing procedures have been adjusted to adhere to provincial guidelines for holding electronic meetings. Any person who wished to be heard regarding this matter was asked to register prior to this meeting by the deadline of Monday, October 3rd, 2022 at 12 noon with the municipal clerk. Any person who wishes to receive written notice of the decision made by the Committee of Adjustment is asked to email their name and mailing address to the Secretary Treasurer following this hearing. An appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal objecting to the decision made at this hearing may be filed with the Secretary Treasurer not later than October 24, 2022. No written notice except as previously noted will be given unless requested at this time. I will now call on Planner Melissa to present the planning report and recommendations. Melissa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Long night tonight.
It is.
Does everyone see this?
Yes, we can.
Let me just go full screen. Okay. So this is a minor variance application A17-2022. The property is located at 69 Mill Street East in Milverton. The subject property is described legally as Lot 4, Plan 403 in Perth East. The property is located at the southeast corner of Mill Street and Cobalt Street. The applicant proposes to construct a detached accessory structure roughly 24 by 40 feet in size at the rear of the existing corner lot. The existing smaller shed, which you see on the screen, will be removed to create space for the new shed. The zoning bylaw permits as a right one single detached dwelling, home occupation, bed and breakfast establishment, group home, and accessory structures. The subject land is zoned residential zone 1 under Perth East zoning bylaw. The property complies with all the zoning provisions for a R1 zone, except the proposed accessory structure coverage and the exterior side yard setback. They currently have 1.25 meters versus 74.5 meters that is required for an exterior yard setback. The existing house is considered legal non-complying as the exterior side yard setback is not in conformity with the requirement. The proposed new shed in the back, however, will not have any impact on the existing non-compliance. The property has well-established vegetation. And I'm just going to switch to the next slide, which shows the imagery. The property has, like I said, well-established vegetation, which will help make the larger shed structure more inconspicuous. The proposed increased coverage of 9.7% versus 5% that is permitted suits the general intent and purpose of the bylaw. The proposed overall coverage, dwelling and accessory structure combined, follows the general neighborhood pattern, as there are several properties in the vicinity, and I'm talking specifically about newer developments along Gerber Drive with similar lot coverage for both the dwellings and accessory structures. In conclusion, the minor variance application is consistent with the provincial policy statement. The proposal and the variance conform to the official plan and suit the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The variance is minor and desirable for the use of the land. As a result, approval of the variance is recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in opposition. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in support of the application other than the applicant or the applicant's agent. The applicant, Terry Drake, and the owner, Lois McEwen, have registered to speak with respect to the application. So Terry and Lois, welcome to Perth East. The floor is yours if you wish to make some comments. Hello, Terry and Lois, are you there? Oh, there you are. Okay.
No comments needed.
Okay.
We're fine with it. Thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing no questions, the committee will now consider a motion regarding the application. And the motion I have is the council or the Township of Perth East Committee of Adjustment received a report dated October 4, 2022, prepared by the planner entitled Application for Minor Variance D13-A17-2022-PE, submitted by Terry Drake on behalf of Lois Marie McEwen, affecting lands described as Plan 403, Lot 4, Milverton Ward, Township of Perth East, 69 Mill Street, East Milverton, and the committee approved minor variance D13-A17-2022-PE affecting lands as described above with the following conditions. Number 1, that the owners obtain the necessary building permit within 2 years of the approval of the minor variance. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Jerry. Second by Amanda. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we have one more public hearing. So this virtual public hearing is being held to consider an application affecting property currently owned by Titus and Lydia Ann Martin and described as Concession 12, South Part, Lot 6, Mornington Ward, 7720, Perth Road 131. The purpose of this hearing is to give the committee and the public an opportunity to hear all interested persons with respect to the proposed application and receive their input, and for the committee to make a decision on the application. All persons attending this hearing will be given an opportunity to be heard or make a presentation. Committee members may ask questions for the purpose of clarifying the application, but are asked to withhold comments on this application until all present have been given an opportunity to be heard. Due to COVID-19, public hearing procedures have been adjusted to adhere to provincial guidelines for holding electronic meetings. Any person who wished to be heard regarding this matter was asked to register prior to this meeting by the deadline of Monday, October 3rd, 2022 at 12 noon with the municipal clerk. Any person who wishes to receive written notice of the decision made by the Committee of Adjustment is asked to email their name and mailing address to the Secretary Treasurer following this hearing. An appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal objecting to the decision made at this hearing may be filed with the Secretary Treasurer not later than October 24, 2022. No written notice except this previously noted will be given unless requested at this time. I will now call on Planner Pooney to present the planning report and recommendations. Pooney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Egetz. With your permission, I'll again share my screen.
Sure. And we can see that.
All right. Okay. Very good. So yes, the subject land is on 7720 Perth Road 131. This is a minor variance application for Mr. and Mrs. Martin. And the purpose of this application is for the owners to build a straw storage to help out with their farming activities beside the manure storage that they currently have. And I'm showing where it is with this arrow. For the purpose of, they needed to request for a minor variance application because of the side yard setback requirements of the Perth zoning bylaw. So they need to, the required is 30 meters for the side yard setback, and they're proposing 25.7 meters. The subject land is located on the west of line 83 and north of Perth Road 131. The lot is approximately 4 hectares in size, 9.8 acres, and has a frontage of 81 meters. Now, in terms of zoning bylaw and official plan considerations, it's designated agriculture in the official plan of Perth County, and it's zoned A-120, which is agricultural special in the Perth East zoning bylaw. And the A-120 zone permits the dwelling with site-specific setback requirements, and it allows for the agricultural use according to the agricultural zone in the Perth East zoning bylaw. So it is consistent with the OP and the zoning bylaw. The proposed variance lots pose no negative impact on neighbors and overall neighborhood development pattern. And now, in terms of the consideration for minor variances, the Planning Act requires 4 tests to be met. And one is that does it maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? We went through it. It's designated agricultural, and proposed straw storage supports the agricultural activity of that land. And so therefore it conforms to the Perth County official plan. Second one is that it maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The zone A-120 does allow for this agricultural use, and therefore it is also conforms to the Perth East zoning bylaw. Number 3 is the proposed variance minor in nature. The planning deems it to be minor in nature, as it's only 4.3 meters in the subject land, and therefore it is minor. Is the variance appropriate for the site? The storage is proposed on an agricultural area, and there is crop farm fields on either sides of the subject property, and there is no building in proximity to that straw storage, and therefore planning deems it to be appropriate for the site. So the proposal and the variance conform to the official plan minor variance policies, and also they do suit the general intent and purpose of the official plan and the zoning bylaw. It is deemed that this change is minor in nature, and it's desirable for the land, and therefore approval of this minor variance is recommended. Thank you. And as for the public engagement, we have GRCA letter that they have no issue with the proposal, and also we have a letter of support from one of the neighbors for that straw storage. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in opposition. No one registered to make a presentation or speak in support of the application other than the applicant or the applicant's agent. The applicant, Mr. Titus Martin, did register to make a presentation or speak with respect to the application. Hello, Mr. Martin. Can you hear us, Mr. Martin?
Oh, sorry, Mayor Agate. It looks like he has disconnected.
Okay. All right, are there any questions from committee members? Daryl?
Yeah, no, I'll just direct this through you, Mayor, to the planner. What is there much differences between West Perth, Perth East, South, West, all of us? What are you seeing for setbacks? Do we have some differences within the municipalities within the county? Just curious. We're on this topic, just a quick, do you know for sure? Is there some differences between us all?
My experience, thank you, Councillor Herlick. My experience is with Perth South and Perth East so far. And I do see similar inquiries really, but I wouldn't know about North and West. Sorry.
Okay,
I can
just
get back
curious.
to you if you would like to know.
Yeah, sure. Just send me an email.
Sure, absolutely.
I know it's kind of off topic, but not. We get enough of these variances. If there was a way, maybe we should look at it. Maybe CAO Gibbons has an in.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, I guess if I might, yeah, I do think a conversation I've had with planning staff, in particular with Sally, is that we do see a number of minor variances, and I think it's time that we review our zoning bylaw as it relates to some of the setbacks to try to avoid the frequency of the setbacks. So certainly there will be a review, Councillor Herlick, as it relates to our neighboring and even outside of Perth County, just to give some consideration to the setbacks, because we are seeing quite a few of them. So it is forthcoming.
Hey, great, thanks. Sorry for getting a little off topic, but not really.
Any other questions from committee members? If not, the committee will now consider a motion regarding the application, and the motion is that the Township of Perth East Committee of Adjustment received a report dated October 4, 2022, prepared by the planner entitled Application for Minor Variance D13-A18-2022-PE, submitted by Titus Martin and Lydia Martin, affecting lands described as Lot 6 Concession 12S, Mornington Ward, Township of Perth East, 7720 Perth Road 131, Listwell. And that the committee approved minor variance D13-A18-2022-PE affecting lands as described above with the following condition. Number one, that the owners obtain the necessary building permit within 2 years of the approval of the minor variance. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Jeremy. Second by Andrew. All in favor? Carried. I declare this virtual public hearing closed. Okay, we're going to move on now to the CAO. We have the electronic workplace monitoring policy. Mike, the floor is yours.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Agate, I'll probably turn this over to Ruth Ann. She really championed the report and the policy, but it's something that we knew was coming, and we're getting the policy in place as per the regulation. So Ruth Ann, is there anything you wanted to highlight in particular for council? You're muted, Ruth Ann, sorry.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, thank you, everybody. No, nothing in particular I want to add, except that it's a requirement now under the Employment Standards Act that we are transparent with our staff about how we monitor all of the electronic communication that goes on. So it's a pretty standard policy, so I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have.
Hey, any questions, Daryl?
Yeah, no, great, thanks. It's very interesting. It's something, of course, you were a conspiracy theory, 5 years ago, if you thought, or a conspiracy theorist, if you would have mentioned they can watch in the back door and see what you're doing and it's all on the server. So yeah, you're being transparent here. You're telling us, you're telling staff. So this is something that may have been going on, not saying Perth East, but in general, multiple places of business, even Perth East, may have been watching people, but they didn't even know. Am I wrong in saying that?
Well, I think that there was always probably potential to be monitoring people. I don't know that there was, but I think with any electronic medium, there's, I guess you would say, some kind of ability to do so. But I can't say, if this was going on or not going on. But I think it is important that we are transparent, letting people know specifically what we are looking at.
Yeah, and I think it would have stood up probably in court before, but yeah, it was essentially, we were doing this, but now we actually are being transparent. We're not sneaking so much. No, very interesting. I'm glad to see this. It's transparency and honesty, of course, is my style. So yeah, thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome. Employment law always said basically that employees do not have a right to privacy. So that was kind of an understood tenet. So now that we're just actually spelling it out is just codifying the fact that this was always an expectation in an employee-employer relationship.
Okay, Andrew?
Thank you, Mayor Eggett. Sorry, Coordinator Young, I just saw this now reading through it again, and I apologize for the late question. So I'm probably one of the few people in the world who actually reads, like when you got to sign up for something on your smart TV and it says wave down about 10 pages. Everything connected to your Wi-Fi or internal house network. Does this policy cover, there's no connection to the rest of the network? Say there's like 5 users, like there's 5 users and probably 20 devices at my house. This isn't monitoring anything on our network, just what's on the corporate device. Is that accurate?
I'm not an IT expert, so I would defer answering that particular question. I don't know if that's something that we should maybe ask our IT person, looking at CIO Gibbons on that. Yeah, so I don't want to misspeak on that particular point.
Yeah, I might clarify with our IT with Matthew tomorrow, but my understanding is when you guys are connecting, you're utilizing a VPN, which focuses on that particular device. So it's doesn't allow us to go beyond that. But I'll get the more technical terms, Councillor McAlpine. I'm probably dumbing it down way too far down, but Matthew can certainly clarify that. So we'll share that with Council tomorrow.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we have a motion. Council of the Township of Perth East received a report entitled Electronic Workplace Monitoring Policy dated October 4, 2022, prepared by the Human Resources Coordinator for Information, and that Council approved the Electronic Workplace Monitoring Policy in compliance with the Ontario Provincial Employment Standards Act 2000, ESA Working for Workers Act 2022, S 2022, C.7-Bill 88 added to the ESA on April 11, 2022. We need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Amanda, second by Jeremy. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, we have nothing from the clerk, finance, public works, building bylaw enforcement, or recreation and fire. So we're going to move down to correspondence now. We have a letter from the Optimist Club of Mornington and the Lions Club about their parade of lights. Does anybody have any questions on that? If not, we do have a motion that the Council of the Township of Perth East receive the correspondence from the Optimist Club of Mornington and the Lions Club of Milverton dated September 20, 2022 regarding a request for a temporary road closure for the parade of lights for information. And that Council approved the route for the parade of lights starting on Industrial Drive, west on Sipple Street, south on William Street, east on George Street, south on Main Street, and dispersing on Wilford Street in Milverton Ward on Thursday, December 8, 2022, from 7 p.m. until 9 p.m. with the storm date Friday, December the 9th, 2022, in order to accommodate a parade sponsored by the Optimist Club of Mornington and the Lions Club of Milverton. And that the event organizers provide sufficient volunteers necessary to control detoured, rerouted traffic, and that the certificate of insurance state that the corporation of the Township of Perth East and the County of Perth be added as an additional insured, but only with respects to their interest in the operation of the named insured. Do we have a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Jerry, second by Jeremy. All in favor? Carried. Okay, we're moving to council and committee reports. You have my Mayor's meeting log, where I was all in for the month of September. Is there any questions on any of that? Nope. Anyone else have any reports? Anything that they want to tell us about? Jerry?
Not a report, not really new business. So I'm just curious, was it yesterday? You gathered at Brunner for natural gas?
Yes.
That's already been done. I'm just curious as how that invitation went out. I know in the past, whenever, especially when a minister comes to our township and makes any kind of an announcement or presentation, we've been notified as a council as a whole, just that if by chance we are available just to attend. So I'm just curious as to how all that came about. I've seen lots of social media posts about it in the press. So just curious how that invite went down.
Well, the invite came from Matthew Ray's office, and Mike and I each got an invite. So I guess we could ask if council could be included. I don't know. They sent it to us directly, and that's how we got to go.
Perhaps maybe if you don't mind, maybe in the future, let all of council know. And if some events, I understand some events with the provincials, only the attendees can attend, or sorry, the invitees can attend. But just anything like that, especially with a minister passing through. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else with anything that they want to bring up at this time? Anything that group or committee that they represent? If not, we'll have a motion to receive my mayor's meeting log of September 2022. Moved by Amanda, second by Andrew. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so we have bylaws 109. Another descriptive motion. Bylaw number 109, 2022, being a bylaw to consolidate municipal drain maintenance completed in 2001 to 2021, and bylaw number 207-2022, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 30-1999, lot 29, concession to Ellis Ward, 5143, line 36, Stephenville, and that the bylaws listed above be read a first, second, third, and final time. We need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Amanda, second by Daryl. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, so because it's a late hour, we're not going to have our closed session tonight. We're going to postpone it to the next council meeting because it is already 25 after 10. So we will move to, are there any notice of motions? Are there any new business? Any announcements? Nope. Okay, so then we just have two motions left. That bylaw number 50-2022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the Township of Perth East at its regular meeting held on October 4, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Amanda, second by Jerry. All those in favor? Carried. And the last motion of the night is that we adjourn at 10:25. Moved by Amanda, second by Andrew. All in favor? Carried. Great, thanks everyone. I know it was a late night. That's why we tried to get you to have the water meeting on a separate night.